call that music the pre-music, or something like that. Anyway, it's Thursday, the 26th. Look at that, my internal calendar's working. 26th of June, 2025. This is Paul English Live. Welcome to the show. Tonight's show, seaweed. That's it, just seaweed. Only joking. Monika Schaefer will be on in an hour or so's time to join us, and we'll be joined imminently by the indomitable Eric von Essex. I mean, really, what would cause a normal person to say seaweed twice in 30 seconds like that? Well, I'll tell you what would cause me to do it. I just before the show started, having been cooped up, I think that's the technical term, all day, slaving over a hot computer, I thought I need to go and get some air in what's left of my lungs. So I just tootled off down to the seaside. It's not very far for me. I don't even need to take a bucket and spade. It's always quite exciting. Very Billy Blusteringtons, as I say around here today. Lots of gusts of wind and nobody flying a kite, which is a bit odd. It's the first thing I usually think of. But I went down there. Where I live, this stretch of the beautiful south coast, it's not all beautiful, of course, but ours is pretty good. It's prone, particularly when we've had a lot of sun, which we have recently, it's prone to absolutely producing tons and tons of seaweed. And the whole of the seafront is green, basically. It's a bit weird. You've got the sea coming in, there's a bit of a stretch of sand, and then green as far as the eye can see. And when the sun's been out in the afternoon, it provides the most fragrant and marvellous bouquet. And I'm being slightly sarcastic, actually. It makes your face pucker. It can be rather testing as a smell. Anyway, so that's the kind of smell we get down here. But never, let's move on. We don't want to be all olfactory this evening. Eric, good evening. How are you? And how's the coast where you are, sir?
Excellent. And it's the old schoolboy gag, isn't it? Why was the sea wet? Answer, why was this? Because the seaweed. Sorry.
Why was the sea wet?
Yes, it's because the seaweed. Sorry.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Oh, I thought it was. I thought, why did the crab get embarrassed? Because the seaweed. But that's just me.
Ah.
Yeah.
Ah. Well, actually, I actually knew a crab that went to a disco and he pulled a muscle. But anyway, there we go. It's a terrible joke. Anyway, it's very fine here, but I think we can outdo where you are. With a South End, as it's called, not South End, it's South End.
Yeah.
Because you have mud, and that mud stinks when the tide goes out. And
What, you have mud? Do you have mud at South End? Do you?
Yeah, South End has mud. Yeah.
Oh wow!
It's supposed to be very good for you, but years ago, ships at Tilbury used to flush their bilge tanks as they went out to sea, and sometimes if they got it wrong.
Right.
They flush their bilge tanks. It's just a route. See, most ships do that. And if they got it wrong and a tide was going in the wrong direction, what they flushed out would come onto the beaches at Southend. Lovely.
Oh, nice. That's lovely. It's quite. I don't know whether. I think they say that seaweed's pretty good if you eat it. Not that I've ever got round to it, but apparently it's full of some really good stuff, isn't it? It's full of good stuff.
Bread.
I don't know what...
In Wales, they have seaweed bread, don't they? And it's a special bread.
Oh, this explains a lot.
I don't know what the name is. Someone in chat. Yes. Oh
This
boy,
explains a lot. Yeah.
But
Anyway, welcome to the show, everyone. You're listening to Paul English Live
you.
here on WBN 324. I'm Eric's here with me already, and as I said, Monika Schaefer's due to be with us in about an hour or so after the end of the first hour. And we're here every Thursday, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. US Eastern on WBN, and that's 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night for Englanders living in jolly old England. I've had such a jolly week, even though I'm getting quite old. Have you had a jolly week, Eric? What's your week been like? Has it been fun?
I've had a spiffing. It's been spiffing and Beezer so far. I think that's
Beezer?
what Prince Charles would say. It's not Prince Charles. It's Beezer. Yeah, it's been jolly Beezer, and it has been also. If you was in the RAF, it was Wizard Prang, a jolly wizard this week.
I'm very pleased to hear that. I've had a very sort of I've been slaving over hot servers today, which is always tremendous fun, and doing certain things, and just whistling through loads of. I don't mean literally whistling. I mean sort of shooting through lots of reading and all this, that, and the other, and gathering stuff up. I don't know if I've mentioned it here before. This is just sort of the opening blag that we have on the show, right, where we don't quite know what we're going to do. Actually, we secretly do, I think, but. I think I mentioned here a few weeks ago a great resource, which I'd just like to mention again for everybody's attention. Those of you who like to have access to lots of free downloads of nifty documents, there is a website called WeLib, as in short for library, WELIB.org. And I've been plundering it this week, Eric. I've been picking up all sorts of wonderfully strange books.
Oh.
Yeah, that I wanted to buy years ago, but couldn't. And if anybody's into buying books, I suppose somebody's got to be, because they do sell. If you've tried to order a book from America recently, it's an insane situation, because I was trying to order a book the other day and I just can't bring myself to do it. The book costs like $24, which is about 16, 18 pounds. That's okay. The shipping is double the price of the book. It's like $45 to ship a book. I mean, it's really mad, Yeah. And so WeLib is a very naughty solution. And I was looking into it, the history of it. It used to be, this is all about freedom of speech, really. It's just this little thread in my head. This is why I sort of brought it up. It's based on a thing that used to be called Anna's, as in the girl's name, Anna's Archive. And that's kind of gone the way of the dodo. It was a bit like Pirate Bay. You remember Pirate Bay? Or are you familiar with all that? These sort of big download sites and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit sort of revealing my age here. We're all a bit sort of long in the tooth about this stuff. But back in the days of Napster, 25 years ago.
You're going back a bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've still got my Napster account. I never even got into it. I couldn't understand why people were just using the internet to send music around. I thought, no, we've all got to read these documents, don't we? But there were Pirate Bay was one of these big sort of file sharing sites. Well, anyway, Anna's Archive was a similar one. If you go there now, welib.org, not that I'm expecting all listeners to do that, but if you were to go there, you will see they've got something like 48 million books or something stupid. I mean, seriously, right? And
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if you, like, for example, if you wanted to pick up all of the written work of Eustace Mullins, now for listeners who don't know who Eustace Mullins is, he's in the forefront. He was a pioneer, really, particularly in exposing the Federal Reserve. Don't worry, tonight's not all going to be about banking. I know I'm trying to lay off it. It's terrible. It's become a sort of drug for me recently. I can't sort of lay off it as a topic.
Secrets.
Yeah.
Yes. Secrets of the Federal Reserve. That was it.
That's right. Secrets of the Federal Reserve, which he was forced into at gunpoint by the famous poet Ezra Pound. He wasn't, of course. Pound had been locked in a mental institution, and Mullins just basically almost like applied for a job, ended up meeting Pound, and he said, "I want you to go off to the U.S. Library of Congress and blah 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 blah," and he put this really groundbreaking book together. It's the first really proper book that goes, missus, there's something not quite right. And this is 1948 or something, or late 40s. So about 30 years after, about 30, 35, 40, 45 years, 30, 35 years after the formation of the Fed. And anyway, if you want all of Mullins' written work, you can get it on welib.org for nout. It's all there. Practically every book he's done. And so there's tons of stuff on there. I was after a book. Do you know what a grimoire is? Have you ever heard of a grimoire?
No.
It's a type of book.
Sounds something embarrassing.
It could be. It's actually evil, really, is a grimoire. It's a book on how to invoke black magic. It's an account of all this kind of thing. It's known as a grimoire. Grimoire. Actually, it's not exactly what I've said. If anybody wants to look it up and correct me, that'd be great. It's something like that, a grimoire. And there's an author in the States called Peter Lavender. And he's written, he wrote a whole series of grimoires about 10 or 11 years ago. He's a very prolific author. Of course, I shouldn't say this, but they're all available there to be picked up. And there's some amazing stuff. I mean, of course, you've got to say, do I have enough time to sit down on my brains and read all these things? Of course, the answer is no. But at least I've got them in abeyance. So those of you that are looking for a tremendous source of knowledge, if you know what you're searching for, I suspect you'll get 99% of everything you're looking for is on there. This is WeLib. Now, Anna's archive came under attack because it was making all the documents available. And of course, we understand that certain authority figures throughout history have never liked that sort of thing. It gets on their wick. And there was court cases which I'm not really familiar with. I think if you go and look it up in Wikipedia, Anna's archive, there's a whole story there about what was happening. And it seems to have morphed into WeLib at the moment. So anyway, I'm just bigging it up as a sort of free speech issue because I just think all of these things effectively should be free. I suppose if the authors are still alive, it's a bit wrong to pick them up. But like I said, what are we supposed to do over here? We can't get these books. I can't ship them over at $44 shipping. It's just a nonsense, you know. It really is. I don't know why the price has gone up so much. Is it part of the trade war, do you think? What do you think, Eric?
I think it's the middleman somewhere making a lot of money, because I remember when I was young, sending something by post was dirt cheap, as cheap as chips. And even to America.
Here we go.
Sorry about that. Did you get an echo there? Yeah, it's gone now.
Yes, I heard myself speaking.
Yeah.
Yes. I heard this silly sod telling a dirty joke. I don't know what it was, about a muscle or something. But no, that's the thing. When they privatised the post office, they said the letters will go through the roof, and they have. The price has gone right. It's ridiculous now. Almost £1 to send a letter. Well, it's over £1 to send a letter. I mean, it's ridiculous. But I remember, when I was young, I used to send calendars and that to my relatives in the States, and I think you got change out of a couple of quid. It's ever so cheap. But now it's terrible. But can you get the book that was banned until 1960? And my uncle, my granddad's brother, so my great uncle, I suppose, the naughty boy bought an illicit copy in 1960, just before the ban was lifted.
Now, am I to guess the book? Do you want me to guess which book I think you're alluding to? Do you want me to guess?
Yes, Lady Chatterley's Lover.
You didn't let me guess.
All right, then I'll let you guess then. It's not
you know what book I think you're talking about? I think you're talking about Lady Chatterley's Lover. Yeah.
Yes.
Am I right? Yes.
And my granddad's brother, saucy sod, he got it, and and it was really. It's disgusting. He's actually bought an illicit copy. Oh, it's terrible. And
can I borrow it?
And I don't know how he
That's
got
what
it.
I'll say.
Yeah, of course you can. You still got it.
Yeah. No, it's there.
Heavily thumbed.
I just thought I'd put you out of your suspense, everybody. If you want a copy of Lady Chatterley's Lover, you can go and download a PDF or a Mobi or an EPUB version, depending on what devices you use for reading these things, from welib.org. You know, it's so strange, Eric, that you should bring that book up, because earlier today I was listening to a quick 6 or 7 minute blurb from Richard Vobes, which was about free speech. He wasn't talking about WeLib or anything. It was just they've got some event coming up, or been trying to get an event organised at Glastonbury, and they tried the town hall, and that didn't work out right. They all sort of put the shutters up and And then they tried a church, and they said yes at first, and then a bit later, sort of the call in the middle of the night said no. And he just mentioned Lady Chatterley's Lover. So there you go. I've gone my entire life. Actually, it's not true. It was mentioned quite a bit in English literature when I was in about 18 years of age. We didn't study Lady Chatterley's Lover. We studied The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence. I found it absolutely pedestrian and tedious beyond belief. I can't begin to tell you how utterly bloody boring I found it. And that's it. I've never even bothered picking up anything up by D.H. Lawrence because it's just grim. And it just doesn't cheer me up. You read any of his stuff?
I think not really, no. I find it boring. But my granddad, I think his brother bought the pop-up book, the pop-up version. And, sorry. But really, when you look at the amount of books that were banned, I think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was actually banned when it first came out. And there's quite a few books that were banned that became bestsellers afterwards.
Yeah,
but look at Spycatcher. That's one of the most boring. That's one of the most boring books you could ever wish to read, but it was banned in this country, and overnight people were buying them from Australia. Well, it wasn't banned.
Peter somebody or other, the author, wasn't it? Peter somebody or other. Yeah,
yes. Peter. Was it Peter?
Peter Piper.
But it's not exactly the most interesting book.
No, I don't have a copy.
If you write a book, try and get it banned. It put sales through the roof. It really will. But
yeah, it probably would actually. I guess it does. It works like that. I don't know how racy Lady Chatterley's Lover would be by today's sort of super pornographic smut standards that we actually have to endure.
Oh,
I mean, you see some of these series that come from those dirty Americans with their awful pornographic cop series things. I'm teasing you. Okay. Yes. We've got the same sort of puerile filth over here. But it's just, I can't watch these things. Someone said, watch this. I won't even mention it, right? They said, watch this thing. I watched it. And this sort of like, Willy Woofter's in it after about 15 minutes. And I go, that's it, off. I can't, I'm not having it. I'm just not having it. I don't want to know. I want Humphrey Bogart. And, I want proper stuff. I want men and women. I'm not interested in some sort of progressive agenda being projected onto my head. I don't care what the rest of it's like. I go, no, in the bin, straight in the bin. That's how it works for me. Yeah.
And I mean, I've never seen Brokeback Mountain, which is about a couple of woofers in it. I don't know.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. Quick. Oh God, I just felt a bit ill then. Oh yeah. Don't do that. It's not fair.
Yeah,
you can't say things like that, Eric, once a week. It's terrible.
I know it's terrible, isn't it? But no, what it is that it's a minority group, a very minority group, and what they're doing is they're pushing them forward all the time. And there's a lot of people that are that way inclined that are against it. Because they know what they're being used for. And as Yuri Bezmenov said, once they've served their usual purpose, they'll be put up against the wall like the rest of us and done away with. And that's it. It's just to achieve.
I'm going to make sure I don't go near that wall.
Well,
yeah, I know what you mean. I do.
Well, it's a bit like the propaganda poster during World War II. It said walls have ears, and someone scribbled underneath, that's why I don't eat their ice cream. Terrible one, isn't it?
It's all right. I think the more rough the jokes, the better. I don't have a problem. Good old dad jokes are the best, really. They're always awkward and nobody knows whether to laugh or not. But I think one of the insidious things about this sort of area, if you want to call it that, is that they will take this is the stuff that gets me. Actually, it all gets me. I'm such a reactionary old fart now. I love it, actually. I've never been happier, really. There's something about growing into being a really mature curmudgeon that's a gift. Everybody shouldn't be scared about this. You really get stuck in. It's fabulous. And I think, however, some of the issues really are extremely, I can't think of the right word. Infuriating is not strong enough. They make you want to be a maniac. What they do is, people will be familiar with this, or what I'm assuming they're possibly still doing it, is they will have a young actress that they'll big up as a sort of teenage star on some sitcom or something. And then years later, she's in some 18-rated movie in a sort of semi-pornographic or demonic role, as if this is a good thing. And they know full well that the whole of the sort of teenage cult that built up around them will follow them through their career. And then they end up being exposed to this sick, miserable filth. I love saying that. I feel as though I really could become a male version of Mary Whitehouse as I get older. But it doesn't actually, it doesn't uplift in any way. There's a terrible sense of dread that I have about these things. They're miserable beyond belief. And there's no redeeming qualities. Of course, if you're going to look at the critics' reviews in the papers, they're always talking about the fine acting. Nobody points out that the story is just complete puke. And you wouldn't tell it to a cow or something, So...
that's right. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to chime in there. Carry on. Paul,
no, chime
sorry.
in. I'd blown out all my steam out by then. Yeah.
What I was going to say, it's a bit like there's a film called What's Good for the Goose.
Yeah.
And it was made in 1969. This is from memory, with Norman Wisdom and Sally Geeson, whose sister Judy Geeson was very, very famous. But Sally Geeson went on to go star in Bless This House with Sid James. And when you see this film, it's about a middle-aged chap played by Norman Wisdom, who was in a sort of stiff-start bank job, I think it was, or civil service job.
Yeah.
And he's driving to the coast somewhere, and he picks up some hitchhikers, and they're all these trendy hippie, 60s people, and they sort of show him out to have a good time. Now, in it, you see the rear end of Norman Wisdom and Sally Geeson.
Yeah.
Stark naked, running into the sea.
No.
And then you see Sally Geeson strutting around with nothing on. And she said that she absolutely hated doing that part. And it's totally unnecessary for the film. Because what it was trying to do, that film, was just showing that how being progressive and trendy was great, and being a stiff-starched married person with a family was wrong. And a man should go and have a fling sometime. And that's what it's really showing. And that was in 1969. And really, the nudie bits weren't necessary.
No.
And I won't tell you who the director was, and I won't tell you what his nationality is, but just look it up on Google, okay? And I think that
what was the name of the film again?
We'll find out a little bit more.
What was the name of the film again,
What's
Eric?
good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yeah.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Norman Wisdom was quite fun
I'm
at
hearing
times,
myself again.
wasn't he? He was quite fun, really. Norman Wisdom. He had a very tough life.
Oh, he was serious in that.
Yeah.
Oh, he did. He was thrown about by his father.
Yeah.
And that's how he knew how to do stunts and that. And at the age of 15, he joined the army because he was starving. He was homeless.
Right.
And they actually helped him on. And during World War II, I don't think he saw any action because he was a musician by that time and quite a senior rank. So it was the army that made him.
Right.
But he would have starved to death if he hadn't have got into the army. Possibly. Who knows? But
yeah.
No.
We got a bit of echo here. I wonder where that's coming
We
from.
have.
Have you just started picking it up? I'm just going to see if it's Paul. Paul, I'm just going to take you off the stage for now. Don't worry, you'll still be able to hear things. Let me just, let's see if it disappears. It might be just something that's...
let me make a comment quick.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go on. Make a comment quick. It can be
Didn't
long
they
if
do
you
the
want.
same thing? Didn't they do the same thing with the movie 10? It was Bo Derek.
Yeah.
And it was decades ago. And Dudley Moore, like fatherly type, husband type, whatever, middle-aged, and the whole temptation thing. Didn't they do the same thing with that?
Yeah, they did, I guess.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Paul, have you got us coming out of your speakers, Paul? I've just got to check because we've got an echo that's just sprung up recently, and I don't think it's either me or Eric because we're both wearing cans. Unless have you got speakers?
Okay, well, can you still hear it? My speakers are all the way down.
La 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 la. No,
Well,
it's gone. It's gone now. That's
La la la
great.
la 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 la. It's gone. Yeah.
I think my la la la
Oh,
was
that's
pretty
good.
good. What do you think about your la la la, Eric? Do you think it was a good la la la? What do you
It
think?
was a bit flat. No, it wasn't that good. No, I
La, 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 la.
I need to go for la 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 training. Yes.
I believe they
you
were
all
both
sounded
above
like Sir
average.
John Gilgood.
I like Paul. Paul thinks
Yes,
they were both
who
above
was
average.
an actor. Yes, but
Larry.
yes,
they were both
might have
above
become
average.
as a John Gilgood one.
Of course, when I was acting with Larry.
He was a
at Stratford.
thespian, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, that always is my funny bit when you say that. When I was acting with Larry.
Yeah, they always call him Larry.
Because you notice John Gilgan was the same in everything.
He was. My mum used to say that. She said, "Oh, he's rubbish. He's the same in everything. He just turns up as John Gielgud in everything." Although apparently he's Edward V or something like that was really quite remarkable. Was it his Richard III? I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to use... That's not a double entendre, by the way. Although I suppose it could be. I suppose it could be when you think about it. But, yeah. No, cool.
Yes. I think, oh, what was he there? Larry was in, I can't say it like you, was in Henry V, wasn't he? Because it was actually filmed in Ireland during World War II, wasn't it? In about 1944. It was Henry V. Oh,
yeah. Well, the one with the speech, the one with the big speech. And all that kind of stuff. It's a great film, though. I mean, visually, it's pretty good, particularly the cavalry charges and things like that. It's quite impressive for the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's quite impressive.
They paid Irish farmers, if they came along with a horse, they got double the pay. And they found it was Irish farmers that actually did that cavalry charge thing.
Right.
Apparently. And no expense spared. And that's why it was so advanced. And it was colour as well, which was rare for those days. But it's absolute, where it comes for reality, it's crap, because those chaps are using a longbow, which they weren't called longbows, they were called war bows, and it's the Victorians that called them longbows. Right. And you see them holding the bow outstretched, and Larry is standing there with his sword up, ready to drop his sword, and they'd all fire. Well, that's crap, because you could only hold a longbow for a matter of seconds. However strong your arms were, you just go and fire straight away. You couldn't hold it that long. They were so powerful. And the other thing is they found that historians have looked into it, and they didn't actually fire the arrows high and down. They actually fired them when the enemy was almost on them, about 40 foot, literally. Fired them into them. That's how guts they had in those days. You imagine it. And you only had one shot, and then you had to get a bow and then do it again. So this idea of the French cavalry in the distance, and you fire a load of arrows or quiver of arrows over to them is wrong. They had to wait until they was almost on them.
Okay, so what year is Agincourt? It's 1300s, isn't it? Agincourt. It is.
I think so. I'm not very good at ancient history.
I'm not very good. Well, it's not ancient.
Because you know why? Yeah.
But I can't remember the dates of these things.
Do you know? Yeah, but do you know why why they call the Middle Ages the Dark Ages?
Yeah, because the usurers couldn't scam us.
Because there's so many knights around. No, because there's so many knights about. So these are out the Christmas cracker jokes, I think.
If you like dad jokes, you've come to the right place, because this is it. 1400 Agincourt, was it? Okay, Henry V. Henry V. 3rd, 8th. No, Henry V, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay. Now, look, I've got reports that would contradict what you just say, by the way. I think I mentioned it a few months ago. I'm not trying to pick a fight. I mean, if we are going to have a fight, I'll bring my bow and arrow. I'll bring my war bow. But I remember I was reading a thing about, I won't jump all the way into this one again, about the Battle of Towton, which is 13 something or other. And the battle reports are that huge volleys of arrows went across the sky, so many that it darkened the sky. And I remember seeing this, that basically the more powerful the bow, you could actually loose your arrows off earlier than the other guy if your bows were stronger, and this would basically give you such a tactical advantage against your enemy that they would wait until that certain time. But there was something like 500,000 arrows fired, 500,000 in the first 20 minutes of battle. 500,000. It's just wow. I mean, it must have been, it can't have been very pleasant. This is Englishmen, of course, knocking 10 bells out of Englishmen, hey-ho, and knocking everything else out of them as well. But it's quite a serious bit of, so I wouldn't mind knowing a bit more about that. Not that we could necessarily employ bows and arrows to solve our problems of today, although no doubt some enterprising chaps are thinking of that very thing, but not that we would even get back to that. But it's, yeah, well, it doesn't really bear thinking about, even though we've just been thinking about it. So obviously we can bear thinking about it. By the way,
there's somebody famous in our green room at the moment. I just thought I'd remind you of that.
Somebody famous in the green room. Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
Yes,
yes.
Well,
yeah, I see.
Yes.
Hi, Monica. We can see that you've arrived. I'm just going to deal with Eric first, and then we'll bring you in. We'll do a few things. What was I going to do? Actually, I've got a song that I wanted to play. Why don't I... What? What was that?
Monica arriving has prevented me from saying the smutty gag. Well, it wasn't a smutty gag because one of my uncles, who was a comedian, he actually walked on stage and said, I'm sorry I'm late. I've been slaving over a hot woman all morning. And when he looked up, he realised it was something like the Women's Union or something. He said, just went down like a lead balloon.
Really? I am surprised.
Yeah.
I am surprised, Eric, that it went down like a lead balloon. I am. Well, look, given that Monica's here...
Because he said...
Yeah, I was just saying, given that Monica's here, let's bring her in, okay? Obviously, there's been lots of action in Canada, so let's just bring Monica in. Good afternoon, Monica. How are you?
I am well. How are you all?
We are fine. We're fine. Eric was just telling us, well, he was trying about to unleash a smutty gag, but then you turned up, so we're not doing that anymore. But it's good. It's good to have you. So yeah. And how's Canada? And how are the lumberjacks? And how are the beavers? How are things?
Oh yeah, I just talked to the beavers this morning, and they're doing really well. They're working away there, and the lumberjacks, yep, same thing.
Yep.
All's good, but we've got some of these invaders. They're threatening to leave because they're not having such a good time anymore.
Really? Which invaders would they be?
I don't know. This is just something I heard when I turned on the Communist Broadcast Corporation, and they were in the middle of something, and I got the impression that some of these perhaps the Dot Indians were getting a little uppity and
the
upset.
Dot Indians. Is that what they call?
Yes.
The Dot Indians.
Well, we have to differentiate between the Feather Indians and the Dot Indians because we have these in Canada, you see. So that's a Canadian thing.
Right. Monica, are you a little distance from your microphone? You're a little quiet. I just wondered if you could, I don't know quite how things... Yeah, just a little quiet. We can hear you quite clearly, but we're just a little quiet. I can make if you're very comfortable, then I'll adjust everybody else because
you know what? No. You know what I should do is I'll mute myself out and I'll do a different microphone, a better one, because you know what? I thought this was starting half an hour from now. I got the time wrong.
It is. But you turned up early. Eric saw you. We all got distracted. We thought it was rude to leave a lady in the foyer for half an hour powdering her nose. We thought this was completely wrong. So that's why I've invited you in.
Oh, well, are you live or you're just having your pre-live chat?
Well, I'm live. Are you live, Eric? I'm quite alive. Yeah, no, the show's going out. The show's going out, Monica. Don't worry about that. This is great. I love this. This is good.
I just checked my pulse.
Yes,
I believe I'm alive.
Paul's alive. We're all alive, Monica. This is good, isn't it? Isn't it good?
I'm so glad I'm not talking with a bunch of corpses.
Yeah. Well, it's early days. You don't know. We've still got a few hours to go yet, so you don't know. Keep your fingers crossed. We'll all be alive by the end of it.
But don't make any adjustments. I'm going to mute so that I don't make a whole bunch of crackling noises while I change up my system here.
Yeah.
And I'll just mute myself, but I'll let you know when I'm back in. I'll either send you a little message or I'll unmute myself and say,
that's fine. Yeah, just burst in and just shout very loudly when you come back in. I'm just going to leave you here on the stage, so that's cool. Not a problem.
Yes, thank you. Okay. I'll just mute.
Cool. See you in a tick.
I really love the phrase "Dot Indians" because I hear tell that if you date a Dot Indian and you scratch the dot off, you could win yourself a convenience store.
What is a Dot Indian? What's a Dot Indian? What is it?
It's an Indian maiden that has the dot on the forehead. And Indians have basically taken over the convenience stores like the 7-Elevens and things in America. I don't know if they've done the same thing in England, but that's where the joke comes from. If you scratch that dot off, you might win a convenience store because that's where they all work.
Oh, I see. I see. What you mean? I'm really thick here. You mean scratch the dot off a bit like a scratch card or something when you win prizes?
Yeah.
Right. Got it. I'm slow
like
tonight,
a scratch-off lottery card.
I'm really slow. I'm not picking this up at all. What a thicko. Got it.
I believe you did fabulous considering the difference in society. The societal difference by millions of gallons of water.
Yeah, I know. Actually, when Monika said .Indian, I thought it was a domain name, like as in .com at first. I thought I was getting very, very confused about things. I mean, did I ever tell you my painting story from years ago, when I was selling paintings? It's very, very boring, so I better keep it short. Basically, short of money in London, 1984. Just moved down to London, broke, as you always are. Fortunately, had a credit card, absolutely hammering that. Thought it might be sensible to get some cash. So I picked up a part-time job on evenings selling paintings. I didn't know. A flatmate was doing it. He said, "Here, you could do it too." So I went off. I didn't know who the boss was or anything. Anyway, one day, the boss comes round and he's a Hare Krishna guy. Seriously, I didn't know. I was just knocking on doors saying, "Hey, do you want some?" And basically, the way that they raised money was these sort of pastiche paintings of cats and dogs, that sort of stuff. They weren't very good. And he came around, and I was completely green, didn't know anything, didn't know why he looked the way he did. Oh, bloody hell. And he came over, and I said in all seriousness to him, as he was paying out my mate with some cash for the week's sales or whatever, I said, "Oh, did you know you've got a little bit of paint on your forehead?" And I was deadly serious. I didn't know. And I thought it was really quite funny in retrospect. My mate, he said, "Why did you say that thing about the paint? Why did you say that thing?" I said, "Well, I thought he must have been painting a wall or something." He said he was dressed a bit odd. I was all sort of northern about it. I said he was dressed a bit odd. "Why did he have paint?" I said, "No." He said, "It's not paint." He said, it's a religious practice." I said, "Well, it's daft." You can't be doing that. Silly. Oh, that was fun. Anyway, he was very embarrassed because he knew what was going on, but I wasn't embarrassed at all. I was like a sort of... Anyway, there you go. It wasn't much of a story, but it's the best one I could drum up with from 1984 regarding dots and things on people's foreheads. Yeah. So that was...
Well, I don't know how true this is, and I heard this many years ago. When they first had immigration over this country, they made the excuse that they needed people on the transport system because after the war there wasn't enough men left, which was a complete utter lie.
Yep.
And there was a Sikh apparently in the East End of London, and very polite, and a woman said, "Oh, hello dear, I hope your head gets better soon." That's supposed to be true.
I think we should start doing that again. Have you? Oh, you must have hurt your head. Something wrong with that. That's a big bloody bandage, isn't it?
I'm back.
brother-in-law.
I've been laughing my head off the whole way through because I was listening to your discussion about the dots.
Well, I was bewildered of this
Paul.
parish, Monika. Paul explained it to me and put me in my place, but I was a bit bewildered. But now that we know. Are they all referred to as Indians then across Canada? Is this just the colloquialism that you've created for them? Is that what's happening?
No, I didn't create it. I won't take credit. I wish I could, but it was on a Twitter space, X, and some. There's a lot going on over there on X. It's fantastic. That's like the
Yes,
what do you call it? The town square, like it's great. Lots of lively discussion, and that's where I learned about this distinction. Oh my goodness, distinction between the dots and the feathers. Because in Canada we need a distinction. Because when we talk about Indians, well, which Indians you're talking about? You've got your Native Americans. That's what I guess they call themselves Native Americans or Indians or First Nations, which is a lie, by the way, or they call themselves Aboriginals. That's kind of more Australian, but I like that Aboriginal term because you think about normal and abnormal, and then think about original and Aboriginal. So that's very accurate, actually. Mm-hmm. So anyway, and then you talk about all these invaders, and that's what they are. They're invaders, and they come from that country over in Asia called India. And there are many of our cities and towns, they have been basically taken over. And, the mayors and councillors and whatnot are from that place.
Right.
And they don't actually have our best interests at heart. They are not assimilating. So I think that if so-called immigrants do not assimilate into the country in which they come to, and they say they are immigrants, well, if they're not assimilating, then they are invaders. That's clear and simple.
Right.
So we have many invaders, as do you, I do believe.
We do. Let's just hold that word invader in mind, because we have a caller that's come into the call studio. Somebody called B. I'm bracing myself. Hi, B. Welcome to the show. Can't hear you. Channel's open. You're unmuted. No? Okay. Sorry about that. There we go. There's not a peep. Don't know what to say. Okay. Invaders. I was just going to say, Monica, that it's true in one sense, but I think of them as in a sort of... they haven't got here under their own steam, have they?
Correct.
No.
Correct. You're absolutely right. They are being instrumentalized by a certain other group of people who, all these people. Yeah, it's absolutely correct. But still, they are here, and it is a problem.
It is. Absolutely. I've had that discussion ongoing, rolling around for years about this thing, saying, it's whether we say it's their fault or not is irrelevant, because once people are present in a space, it is a problem that will have to be sorted out. And of course, people want to leave it and think it'll just sort itself out, which of course is the biggest mistake of them all. And we have a guy over here called Dominic Cummings. Now, he used to be a sort of bully boy, I think, in the Conservative Party. He didn't look like a bouncer, but he used to be a bouncer at nightclubs. Were you aware of that, Eric? Dominic Cummings being a bouncer?
No. Yeah, again, he doesn't look like the type to be a bouncer, does he?
He doesn't.
Unless he was bounced when they throw him out, and he sort of bounced
That's
off
right.
the curb or something like
But
that.
he was a bit like a fixer
yeah.
with inside the Conservative Party. He was he the whip or something, which of course is rather a menacing term. The guy that goes around and whips all the politicians into line. He wasn't really the whip, but he was given certain sort of privileges to be able to move from department to department and basically yell at people in a very assertive way. Let's call it that. I was going to be very vulgar then. I'll do that a bit later. But anyway, he just did an interview. I haven't even caught it. It's about an hour, or he did a little presentation about an hour and 20 minutes long recently, maybe last week, talking about certain aspects of the problem that we're facing, about what's happened. And there's two bits that I've seen so far. I'll deal with the sort of migrant bit first. The migrant bit, he says that the solution's relatively straightforward. You basically send boats out into the channel and turn them back. If they don't, you blow them out of the water. Literally, that's what he said. Okay? And literally, that is the answer. That's the answer, I'm afraid. Now, it might seem hellishly wrong that these people, apparently, the story is they're fleeing this, that, and the other. No, they're not. They're nearly all young men, and they've been sent here in a coordinated effort by another agency. That's exactly what's happening. And I'm afraid it's just really quite simple. Not only can they not come, but nearly all of them that have come over the last 20 years have all got to go back as well. It's easy for me to say that sentence. Of course, it's the wrong thing to say in England at this time. But the simple truth is it's either your own people or it's them. Whose side are you on? And people go, well, do we have to take sides? Well, you didn't have to when they weren't here. It was fine. But now that they're here, unfortunately, history will tend to show that you do, I'm afraid. And if you keep on acquiescing and thinking there's a love and light solution to all this, you're mad. Because the reason we're in this situation is that the other side is aggressively seeking to instigate violence in our nation. That's what they want to do. So you turning and being all happy-clappy about it, I would suggest is not really the right response now. It's not the right response. Not that I want to see these people harmed. I simply don't want them to come. But, if they're going to blow Libya up, and which was one of the great sort of gateways, as Colonel Gaddafi said, if you get rid of Libya, he said, you're going to be completely overwhelmed. They're going to pile through the ports here. And, of course, that's exactly what's happened. But they couldn't do it under their own steam for the simple reason that this is augmented by the traitors within the European Union, traitors to all European peoples. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Exactly.
Really. Yeah.
My motto is last in, first out. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
You're talking about this, and we were talking about this on the show this morning,
right?
And because they do, and it was quote here.
We're just losing you a bit. You just dropped out there. Everybody getting Paul, or are you dropping out, Paul, a bit? Can you hear him, Eric? Monica? Or is it me?
Let me give it a shot. I'm sure I won't be able to
one who we lost there, but the other Paul sounds good to me
Really?
anyway.
Okay. They might be messing with you, Paul. I don't know.
Yeah, probably, because I was just talking about that
this
thing.
morning,
Is that a little warning shot to me? Don't talk about the migrants, Paul.
Yeah, right. Well, we had a quote from Cicero this morning, and it
was he on the
seems
show?
to be. It not only applies. No, he wasn't.
Oh, pity.
It not only applies to the Zionists and how they have taken over everything, but it also applies to the immigrants. Mm-hmm. Particularly with respect to them being invaders. Mm-hmm. And the quote goes something like this: "A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banners openly. But the traitor moves among those within the gates freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. For the traitor appears no traitor. He speaks in accents familiar to his victims, and he wears their faces and their garments. He appeals to the baseness that lies deep in the souls of all men. He rots the soul of a nation. He works secretly and unknown in the night to undermine the pillars of the city. He infects the body politic so that it can no longer resist. A murderer is to be less feared." By Cicero. And I think that's the same thing we've got going on with the immigrants. They are coming in. They are melting into societies. They are taking public offices, and they are now making decisions that are not American, that are not British, that are not Australian. They're taking over purely by filling those seats.
Purely by being in this location. That's like why I was banging on a few months ago about being a locationist, that it's nothing to do with all of these other things. It's simply that they're in the wrong part of the world. But they're not in this wrong part of the world because they went, oh, let's all go to England, it'll be great. No. They're in this wrong part of the world because somebody set up this entire system to lure them here and to pay them to come here and to be here. And of course, the cover stories that we've been receiving for decades now are, well, in our case, you British are so lazy and you can't do all these things, we need them. To which the answer would have always been, we don't care. We'd rather be lazy and rot from within than this. I mean, that's simply true. You know, they're always scaring you, going, well, the economy. Yeah, right. So it's the same. I know we repeat these things over and over, but I guess you kind of have to, which is that the protection racket, which is all that government is, it basically creates fear and then says you need us to protect you from this imaginary hobgoblin that we've just created. And of course, in real terms now, they've done it's more than imaginary. They've actually sort of, you know, they've made it literally manifest. Although this is not about. Yeah, Monica, sorry. Before you move on to something, and maybe you weren't moving on, but I just want to add 2 points to this. Relevant. When they celebrate and to applaud when, for example, when Nenshi became the mayor of Calgary, this is a number of years back, it was just celebrated in the mainstream media, the first Muslim mayor in Canada. This is wonderful, wonderful. Everybody's cheering. So when they get us to that stage where we're celebrating our own, you know, the invasion of our own place, that's one thing. And then the other point I wanted to make is that what a gaslighting operation they did, because, you know, they convinced us, our generation, to have less children. Well, they did that by all kinds of means and methods, you know, the feminist movement, not the least of that, which is responsible for that, but also by guilting us and telling us there's too many people on this earth and the planet cannot sustain this. And so, you know, we're conscientious and we care about nature, we care about the world. So many of us had less children because of that, feeling that that's our obligation to, you know, be good to the earth and not have so many children as our parents did. And then, of course, a generation later, they say, well, we need workers. We need workers, so we have to bring them in. Let's bring in these. First, it starts as temporary foreign workers. And then, well, we all have seen where
where it goes from there, where it went from there. So those are the 2 points I wanted to add to this excellent discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just had a few technical doodads. I think it might be me that's getting a little bit of thumping here, because you're all hearing each other fine, yeah? You're all
Yes.
okay. Yeah. It's just.
And how's my sound, by the way, after I put a
great,
new microphone?
absolutely fine. I didn't comment on it because it was that good. It's absolutely spot on.
Good.
So yeah, there's
Good,
not
good.
a problem at all, Monica. It's lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's a matter of actually, to some degree, getting those around us to be committed to their own welfare, as opposed to being worried about what others may think of them. I mean, there's so many sort of subtle little psychological forces in play. I mean, if you look at that situation where people have spoken out in a crowd, that kind of dynamic, this is what most people are facing. I think that they do want to speak out, and more are, and it's very, very important, is this speaking outness. I think it's very, very important. But normally the old traditional situation is someone wants to stand up and basically rebut what they're being presented or instructed to do. And those around them say, don't stand up and say something, you'll only cause more trouble. That kind of dynamic is still at play, regrettably, with a huge number of people. And they'd rather keep their head down and, it'll be all right. And you're the troublemaker for wanting to actually examine the situation and saying, look, I don't accept what's been said to us here. The evidence is not that. It's about something else. And, that's the thing that's holding a lot of people back. That said, I think less people are holding back. You mentioned X a few minutes ago, and I am spending more and more time on there. I'm still slightly circumspect about it, but there are things going on there. You get used to it really, really quick, because it's a bit like many of the conversations that we were involved with sort of online, maybe 2016, 17, 18, 19, very vivid, let's call it that way. Well, there's tons of stuff on there that's similar, and I guess, Monica, you must have noticed that. That's why you mentioned it.
Yeah, actually, I was brought in to the fold on X relatively recently, and it was to join a space. There's all these spaces happening there, meaning that somebody hosts a space, and then anybody can join in as either a listener, or they can also categorize themselves as a speaker, and of course then the host needs to allow them in as a speaker. It's really great. Sometimes you see these spaces, they've got like 2,000 people in the space.
Yeah.
Sometimes more, sometimes less, of course. And then there's some channels that are 24/7, like, what is it called, JQR?
Oh yeah, have you tuned? I've tuned into that. Yeah, JQ
great.
Radio. Which,
yes,
of course,
yes.
So if everybody doesn't, JQ stands for the Jewish Question. So it's Jewish Question Radio. They've had, are you familiar with that? I think he's Denmark. Mads Palsvik. Of course, it's not a particularly fortunate first name, Mads, M-A-D-S. Mads, have you heard of him? Or
No, I haven't. No.
He's very interesting. He's worth following on Twitter. He's an ex-banking guy and an ex-Danish minister guy, knows his stuff. He's full on, right? I look at these posts and I'm going, holy moly. And I'm wondering, and then I get suspicious, because am I a timid weed? I don't know, but I get kind of suspicious. I'm thinking, is this a flushing out operation? I don't know where to place Musk, and it doesn't really matter, because Musk couldn't defend you if other forces came against him and decided to screw around with his business empire, as we well know, unless he's smarter than all of them. But I don't think it kind of works like that. I mean, I do think it's a bit of a bun fight, but
just to say, it's not totally free for all over there, even though there's some fantastic discussions going on, and you can see there are millions and millions and millions of people wide awake, and they're having a very great time there over at X,
Yeah.
But I do also know of people who get their accounts axed.
Do you?
And then
Right.
they start over, and they just start over and start over. I know one, I think she called, what's her name again? I'll just think, Canadian Girl or something like that, and I think then she's on to number 18 of her accounts. She'll just start over and go, okay, Canadian Girl 19, Canadian Girl 20, or whatever. I think that's her account name. And, she's openly racist. Okay, well, maybe we have to look at that term and not take it as a negative anymore, because we just all have to become aware that that's been weaponized against us. And, she calls it as she sees it. But anyway, in spite of the fact that people are getting axed over there and then they start over and whatnot, I have to say it's very lively. It's very lively over there.
It is. I'm even seriously considering paying for an account. I don't normally consider things like that because I'm very thrifty, but I am.
Okay.
Well, because
I don't know.
If you
I don't
pay
even know
for
how
it,
that works. Yeah.
It's like I think
it's
it's 84 quid a year, so maybe $100 a year or something like that. But what that enables you to do then is run your own streaming channel like JQ Radio. In other words, I could take this show and we could start to run it over on Twitter. Now, I don't have any following on Twitter. I've got about 60 following, and I only use it really to notify people about this show. Saying that, I've just realised I've not put a notice up today, so there's always something that I miss. But I'm connecting up with more and more people. There's some fantastic stuff, and I'm finding more and more English and British patriots. There's loads. There's absolutely tons. And once you connect up with one, it references others. And I think basically we're kind of all in. Really. Whatever's going on, these connections with the other people are great. And some of the posts are absolutely fantastic. They're extremely candid. I think that's the right word. They're candid. They're very clear. And most of the British stuff you see is, I want my country back. We're going to get it back. And it's time for us all to wake up and get on with it. And there's more and more and more of these people. And it's going to happen. And one of the things that Dominic Cummings, just jumping back to him, was talking about the civil service over here, and it's that it is literally out of touch, which should not surprise anybody, even though it's kind of an appalling thought. You tend to think, well, they're completely in touch and they're just being highly manipulative, but it's worse than that. They're thick. I'm serious. They're very good within the narrow channels of their administrative abilities. They're considerably good at that, and they know how to micromanage conversations in media and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to understanding what's really going on with us, they don't know. They do live, the political actors, that acting troupe called the political class, and that's all it is. It's just a big troupe of actors with lines to say and all this other blather they come out with. They're totally out of touch with the audience. They're completely. There's only a few that are actually got any idea of how people genuinely feel. And we've had a lot of sort of silly decisions and stuff like that. Anyway, we're coming up to the top or the end of the first hour. And we're going to look at some other things after this. But I want to play a song. Now, I've been sort of umming and ahhing about playing songs. I know that everybody that tunes in, I play them all the time. But what happens, I think I mentioned this the other week, when the show gets published and goes out onto certain podcast platforms, they write to me and go, you can't play that song, Sonny. We're taking this show off of the list. And so I don't really cry about it too much. So it's possible that you may be the only people that ever hear this, because in the podcast that I'll likely publish afterwards, I might have to just take this out. I don't know. It all seems a bit wet, really. I don't like being wet about these things. But there we go. Anyway, look, I was out, what was I doing yesterday? I was out having another walk by the Seaweed Sea yesterday evening. And I was listening to a podcast. I got a bit bored with that, turned it off, sat down, thought, I'll put some music on. And this just popped up. And I just love it, and it's very groovy, and it's very much the sort of stuff that I've always kind of liked, and you'll be extremely familiar with it almost from the beginning I start to play it, even though you don't know what it is. So we're going to play this, and we'll be back after this song with hour 2. See you on the other side. Isn't that what they say? It's a bit corny, but I just said it. Here we go.
3-4 radio. Shut them.
Attention all listeners. Are you seeking uninterrupted access to WBN 324 Talk Radio despite incoming censorship hurdles? Well, it's a breeze. Just grab and download Opera Browser, then type in WBN324.zil. And stay tuned for unfiltered discussions around the clock. That's WBN324.zil.
The views, opinions, and content of the show hosts and their guests appearing on the World Broadcasting Network are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of its owners, partners, and other hosts or this network. Thank you for listening to WBN 324 Talk Radio.
And welcome back on the other side of that rather groove-tastic little song. Maybe I'm the only person in the world that likes that kind of stuff. I don't know. Hopefully not. So there we go. That was J.D. McPherson, and I think I played something by him the other month, and that got banned. I got the notice you can't play anything. He's actually touring in England at the moment. I don't get time to really listen to too much music, but when I do, apart from classical stuff, which I listen to a great deal, I listen to stuff like that because I used to play stuff like that about 45 years ago. How about that? So there we go. Really quite enjoyed it. So not too heavy. I'm not a heavy metal guy, but there you go. We've all got our little weaknesses. Anyway, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to part 2. Now, where were we before I so rudely interrupted everything with that song? I can't remember where we were. We were doing something interesting, weren't we?
We're talking about immigration. And what I was going to say is, that's right. And where I live, they were awarded a grant for the HMS Windrush when it docked in Tilbury in 1948 with the first lot of West Indian immigrants coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And this last weekend they had a Windrush celebration. Well, the thing is, there weren't any West Indians that I know of in Hertfordshire, and where I live, there's still very few.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what's going on. But apparently the government's been giving out grants all over the place. Now, okay, and they had a weekend I'll read it. Now, it says here, it says, a weekend event celebrates the arrival of HMS Windrush, and they're going to be a live band, DJ, a choir, live performances by Caribbean artists, children, and young people from the community. Vendor stalls will serve African cuisine, African Caribbean food will be served on the day. There will be a licensed bar serving rum, punch, Caribbean beers and soft drinks, and that was on the 21st of June. That was last week.
Right.
So why haven't we got celebrating English culture where there's jelly deals being sold, there's going to be a Cockney type band and things like that? Can you imagine that happening? Can you imagine them doing that? Those racist, terrible people.
Mm-hmm.
You white supremacist, you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. It's terrible, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
So
jelly deals are terrible. Have you ever eaten jelly deals, though, Eric? I mean, have you eaten jelly deals?
Yes, they're bloody horrible. Yes,
I can't eat them. They're beyond belief. They're just, what? An eel? Not eating eels?
There's the liquor.
I know.
Jelly deals and potato, and all it is bone and a little bit of meat around it, and you pay a fortune for it. It's horrible. I can't stand it. Yeah.
So, Eric, something catches my attention about what you just read. The date caught my attention, the 21st of June, which is the solstice, right? And it's kind of an important date. And here in Canada, that has become, what do they call it? National Indigenous Day. Anyway, it's something to do with every year. This is like a big national Indigenous. We got to celebrate the Indigenous, the Feather Indians, back to that term. And
Feather Indians.
Yeah,
I like that one.
The First Nations, what they call themselves, which is not true. But anyway, that day is dedicated to them. What they take these it's deliberate, taking these important dates and turning it into something that's very anti-us, European peoples, So it just caught my attention when you read it out, and it happened to be on the 21st of June.
Yeah, that's a good observation,
that's interesting,
Monika.
Because
it is.
That's right. If you go to Glastonbury, I don't know if you ever heard of Glastonbury, but that's where all the trendy hippies are, and you have these new age shops, and they've got things like dream catchers and someone's, I don't know, caught a pet.
Oh, those come from here. That's the Feather Indians.
Shoved it in it. That's it. And
that's your proper Indians, isn't it? That's your proper North American Indians, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
it's nothing to
the
do
dream
with their
catchers.
culture.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with our culture. You're absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that not all, but the majority of feather Indians, especially in North America, would skin each other alive, and torture was part of their culture.
I'm so
savage
glad you brought that
bastards.
up. I'm so glad you brought that up because, you know, the way they are painted now in the media 24/7, the mainstream media, is that they are noble, that they are peaceful, that they are in harmony with nature and with each other. And they have this, I mean, you just think that they would be like these walking angels floating 6 inches above the ground and
Living
Yes.
with nature. Oh, and hang on, let's get the drum out. Boom, 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 boom,
Yes.
boom, boom, boom. That's it. Sorry, yeah, that's it. Yes.
Yeah,
But
it's very
it's,
far.
I mean, we've got
it's
terrible
very far
mistakes.
from the truth. You know, Tom Goodrich, who passed away, well, under a year ago.
Yes.
But Tom's best-selling book is called Scalp Dance. No doubt there'll be a PDF version of it on welib.org by now, but Scalp Dance is his best-selling book, and it's about the trials and tribulations of the pioneers in the West, the Europeans moving across America in the 1800s. I think it's after the Civil War, so it's 1865 onwards through to the 1880s and 1890s, and their encounters with the Plains Indians. And it will leave you in absolutely no doubt about the savagery of the people that they were facing. It's off the charts, this stuff. Some of the sort of accounts of the unbelievable endurance and resilience under tremendous pain that some of these settlers did. There's one woman got scalped. She walked like 100 miles or something to get back to civil. She lived on for years and years, but I don't have that rosy view of them. I'm sure that they've, like all cultures, they had their good guys and their bad guys. But basically, and another point that's not really made very much is that more Indians died at the hands of Indians than died at the hands of the white guy. Although impregnating the cloths with whatever it was, pneumonia or was it, or TB or something, was devastating. But it was just one of those. It was one of those events. But they were not the great noble people all the time that people that is told about. They simply weren't.
And you know, this thing about the putting diseases into blankets and whatnot, I mean, I don't know now what actually happened, but because we've been lied to about virtually everything in our history, I'm having second thoughts and I'm being skeptical about it. If it did happen, who did it? If there was a deliberate infection of blankets and whatnot.
Yep.
But I need to dig into that because I'm telling you, I do not trust that story that, the European people just decided we're going to infect all these blankets and spread them out. I do believe that there is probably way more to the story that they're not telling us. And I would just venture a guess that with 99% certainty, that story has been either grossly distorted or perhaps even completely, I don't know, invented. I don't know. I do not know. But
I think it's good to question
very
it.
skeptical.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Very healthy approach, I think, with all of these things. I've ever told you that account of that boat. I'm calling it a boat. I guess it's a ship at the time, that arrived at Jamestown about 1615, something like that, in the early days of the arrivals of... I'll try and keep it brief, but it illustrates this point. They'd spent, I don't know how long the crossing took, 3 months, 4 months? Pretty difficult, right? And they would lose people on the voyage across the Atlantic because it was a wooden boat and people got ill and all sorts of things like that. Anyway, they'd made their way all the way across and there's some kind of a tributary. My geography is useless when it comes to Jamestown and that part of the US coast, but they were coming into port. They were going to take them, a couple of hours. And as they're moving in, everybody's up on the deck getting fresh air because they can see land, and they're all very, very excited, of course, as you would be having been on a boat for 3 months, to get your feet back on land. And suddenly a shout goes up from the people on the upper deck because over on the right side, what's that, port or starboard? I don't know, but on the right side of the ship, my dad would kill me if he heard me say that because he used to explain it to me when I was a kid. They see a canoe come out of these sort of rushes or these things from another little river. And in this canoe, there are 3 or 4 squaws and children, Indian children, and they're paddling like Billy-O for all they've got. And there's a look of absolute fear on their face, right? Real anxiety. And they wonder what's going on. They can see that these people are very, very concerned in the boat and they're paddling like mad. Then about 30, 40 seconds later, they find out why, because there's another canoe with about 4 or 5 white guys in it, armed, coming out in another canoe going even quicker after them, right? And they don't like what they think is about to unfold. And so they're shouting. The people on the boat get more and more agitated as this event unfolds in front of them. And both of the canoes pass in front of the boat, in the front of the boat, so that now they all move across to the left-hand side of the boat to see what's going on. At which point they see that the white guys catch up with and get their oars out and hit everybody that's in the Indian canoe and hold them under the water and kill all of them. Okay? So you got to know, they kill the lot. And then they get back, they put their paddles back in the boat and they paddle back to the port, and they get out and they're already getting undressed or whatever, and they're with the harbour master, at which point the captain of the ship gets off the ship as soon as he's brought this ship in and immediately wants to go and complain to the harbour master or find out what on earth was going on. I should imagine the language was probably pretty forceful and bright, let's put it that way. And the head guy from the canoe is there, and this guy's about to kick off, and he basically stops him from talking and explains what they've just seen. And the story is... I can't justify what's happened, but you'll understand why these men did what they did. They'd been out, I guess, being pioneers, whatever they'd done recently, and one of their members had been caught. One of these guys' mates had been caught by this Indian tribe. He'd been strapped to a tree, and they had peeled all the flesh off him down to his waist. They found him on this tree. He was still alive. And they just went insane. Basically, they went, we're not having that. It turned out that this Indian tribe had a god. I can't remember its name. And the way that they made sacrifice to the god is that the god loved pain. So their job was to inflict as much pain as they possibly could on anybody that they caught. This is a common practice. So I don't know what you think about that tale, but it's that there's always two sides to a story. So I can imagine that the people arriving from Europe were understandably extremely distressed to see this, a sort of murder, a mass murder taking place in the water right next to their boat. But when it was explained, the guys didn't get prosecuted or anything. I mean, they just said that's the way it is, and we're going to deal with them that way every time we find them because they're not killing us. And that's...
Paul, thank you for telling that story, because what we would hear or read in the mainstream history books is only half of the story.
Correct.
Only the account of the white men smacking those squaws and children and killing them all, and that's all we would hear about. We would not get the background at all. And I have also read much about their practices, the Indian tribes, that about this pain thing, that the more pain the better, the harder the torture, the more gruesome the torture, the better. Somehow they got power and energy or whatever from that through their special gods or whatever it is.
Yep.
So this part of the story is never told in our mainstream these days, and here in Canada these days we are just being pummeled over the heads 24/7 about these residential schools and how this was a genocidal system, and nothing could be further from the truth. Now, I'm not saying nothing bad ever happened, but then you can't say that nothing bad ever happened in our public schools either. I think we should all go for reparations from somebody for having inculcated lies into our heads and whatever other bad things happened. This has poisoned our people so that we have become collectively suicidal in terms of our white guilt complex, and in which we pay for our own extermination services, by paying for these type of fairs and celebrations that Eric just told us about.
Yeah.
On June 21st, right? So we're paying for our own demise by funding these celebrations of all the other cultures, just not ours. Anyway, I've kind of gone on a tangent here, but full circle back to this story about the Red Indians and the kind of lifestyle and the kind of belief system that they had before contact with European man. And that part is just so twisted in our, the Orthodox narrative that is told to us. They are just so noble and so holy. And I'm going to say this again. I know we repeat ourselves sometimes, but I am coming from a place of great empathy and fairness in my heart, because I grew up in a household where we just loved the Inuit culture, the Eskimo culture. My parents came to Canada to go up north to be with the Eskimos. My father had that dream ever since he read a book about them, was fascinated by them, went up north. My parents loved it. I wasn't born yet during the years that they lived amongst the Eskimos and traveled around by dog sled, a sled pulled by a dog team to go to the various hamlets of people and whatnot. And this is I grew up with that. So I grew up in a German household, but also a very, empathic. Like, we had great love of the Eskimo people. We had visitors from the north. They stayed at our home and we welcomed them in. So I'm just saying my background here. I'm not coming from a place of, I was just born a hater. And I'm not a hater. It's
exhausting, hating
but
people.
What I see, it's exhausting, I know. I mean, that's silly to say, I'm not a hater. That's not what I don't mean to put it that way, because you never get defensive about the accusations they hurl at you. No, embrace it and say it. But the thing is, what I do not like is that even the Eskimos are jumping on the bandwagon and taking full advantage of the position that they are in now, but they are being instrumentalized by those that, we talked about this earlier, who's behind these things happening, who's behind the invasions and all that stuff, like the so-called immigrants, but who's behind this, worshipping of the native people at the cost of us, right? So there's somebody else doing all this, but they don't realize that. They're just jumping on the bandwagon. They get money, they get apologies and then payouts and this kind of thing. And they don't understand the full picture. Plus, it's another generation gone by, and then yet another generation gone by, and they're being told stories. They don't know their own history anymore either. They don't know anything really. They're just getting influenced by what's being told and taught in the mainstream media, and it's easy to become victim in the victim mentality. In that milieu. We had our Truth and Reconciliation thing that went around Canada during the course of 7 or 8 years. That finished in, I think, when did that wrap up? It was just before the finding of the unmarked graves at Kamloops. But I think it was, in the 20 teens. So 2017, 18, 19, 20. Anyway, in 2021, then they found, and I'm putting this in giant inverted quotation marks, the unmarked graves with their ground penetrating radar. That was just over 4 years ago in 2021, late May. And then all kinds of things, this domino effect of events happened since then, that basically this has been put hammered into everybody's heads, that all these mass graves and the schools were genocidal institutions. And again, the reality has been so twisted and so turned, and their own memories, that the plaque that was at this Truth and Reconciliation commission that went around the country during the course of several years, even for all the people that wanted to testify and relate their experiences, they would read this giant plaque at the entrance. And I don't have it in front of me, but I did read it at one time. And let me tell you, you would be made to feel very, very reluctant to tell anything positive, any positive experiences, because it was all about all the harms that were done and the abuse that happened there. And so they would, if anybody in their own head thought, gee, I had good experience there, these were good years of my life, they wouldn't want to talk about that, because then they would feel like maybe they're not being good to their neighbors or their friends in the band, and because they suffered. And if they tell good stories, then it's going to be somehow taken as, oh, everything's fine, and they didn't experience those horror stories. This is how it goes. Like, they were very discouraged from telling their own good memories, but certainly many did. And there were something like 20,000 pages in the report, but only the summary report got talked about in the media when it came out. And the summary of this commission only highlighted the horror stories, and of course these stories are just people's memories, and they're much later, just like the memories of the survivors of that certain event during World War II, which we're not allowed to discuss openly, and they get distorted too. But even so, if their own they did have many good stories, positive stories, but those did not get talked about in the summary report, the executive summary report. And do you think that anybody really is going to read that 20,000 page, the full report? No, the media, they all report about the summary, and the summary only has one side, and who knows how true any of it is. Some of it might have been true, some of it would have been exaggerated, some of it might have been false memories. We do know that false memories can develop when you're surrounded by stories and rumors and stories and more rumors and stories. Those Indians who did say, and occasionally this would pop up for 30 seconds in sort of mainstream circles, that, gee, those are the best 9 years of my life, or those are I only have this career because of my education in the residential school that I went to. That those Indians would get shut down right now. Maybe they'd find some scandal or invent a scandal about them, and they'd just make them go away. That would be shut down even among their own people, not just among the mainstream media that's run by the you-know-whos, but it's even among their own people, because that was then disadvantageous to the rest of the people who were getting money. But, who's getting the money? It's usually the chiefs of these bands. And then you go to these reservations and they're still having to boil their water, for years and years, and their places are in shambles. But then again, why is there these reservations? Why are they in shambles? And why is there garbage all over the place? And why are they so dirty and messy? It's because they live so harmoniously with nature. Again, none of this adds up. Nothing makes sense. It does not jive. Like, your observations are not consistent with the narrative that they tell us. None of it adds up. Anyway, I've babbled on long enough. Over to you.
Yeah, none of it adds up. I think Yeah, Eric, please.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to chime in, but there's two films that spring to mind which are they're absolute rubbish, and that is A Man Called Horse with Richard Harris, which is about as close to reality as I mean, it's just not. It's just fantasy, but it corrupted people's minds. And the other one is Dancing with Wolves. Very nice film, yes, but complete fiction, and both are complete fiction. But it's all sort of anti-white man, pro-Indian. Yeah. And it just wasn't like that. I mean, in Dances with Wolves, he rides into an Indian reservation and says, hello, if he rode into an Indian reservation, he wouldn't be alive for very long. Well, correction, he'd be alive for long enough for them to torture him, but it wouldn't have been, oh, hello, it's bullshit. Excuse my language. And
but it is.
I think my personal feeling is communism is immaturity. Because the people that run communism are very, very immature, because they can't see. I mean, a child cannot see the next stage in front of them because they haven't been on this earth long enough to get wise enough. And I do believe that there is something wrong with the development of their brain, because it's strange that communism came about 2 generations after the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, where people were more mollycoddled, where, I mean, it was the survival of the rich, the fittest before the Industrial Revolution, but afterwards, people being born that would not have survived childbirth. That is a good thing. I'm not criticizing it. But when you look at this communist type mentality, it is childish all the way through. Children. Have you noticed that at all?
Well, Yes, I mean, I would say it's also childish in the vicious and worst sense of when children behave cruelly to one another. We must not forget that.
Yeah.
It does happen
Yeah.
until Dad
It's
comes along
perhaps
and gets older. You say, you never behave like that. If I ever see you do that again, I'm going to knock 10 bells at you. And that's what fathers are for. I never had to have a conversation with my boys about anything like that because they were just spot on all the time. I'm serious. They were just great. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad sign. Maybe, young boys these days are less feisty. I think that's probably true to say. I got in a few punch-ups at school. Things were resolved with fists from the age of 7 to about 17. Often they were, when I say often, I mean 4 or 5 times. That's enough, isn't it? I haven't sort of hit anybody since I was 19. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but it's just one of those things. You get exasperated when you're young, and you just, it's almost like your sense of justice when you're young is really good, to be quite honest. It's spot on. You just, whoa, bang, you have this thing come over. You go, I either stand my ground or I get whacked, and all those sorts of things. So children can behave badly, and it's worth just dropping in that story I was mentioning about the killing of the squaws and their children. The reason the children were killed is that they had participated in the torture. They found them doing it. You see, and then they went over to examine their mate who was still alive. They had to kill him. Obviously, they couldn't leave him like that, so they shot him because poor sod was just in agony. I mean, just had no chance of recovery whatsoever. And that's why they just, bloodlust comes up. Oh, this is bad. Nobody knows quite how they're going to behave if you were faced with something as horrific as that, because that's horrific. And you've mentioned as well, Eric, that, when people have shock, they tend to revert to a childlike state, and it can be the childlike state of absolute revenge. Nothing will stop someone who's got that when the red mist comes down. I know we don't experience it much, thankfully, because it's quite frightening, but everybody's got it in them. You don't think you do. Oh, it's civilized man. Yeah, you watch. If you push them to a certain point, and the controllers, I suggest, know this, and would use it as a threat in certain circumstances. I mean, we're not facing super arduous situations at the moment, but we are enduring psychological warfare 24/7. And that's, it's a different kind of torture. And there are ways of dealing with it, but you have to be able to think. And of course, they're relying, I suggest, on the fact that huge swathes of the population are not very good at that. I'm not saying they can't think at all. It appears that way, when you see everybody conforming to wearing masks and the sort of group psychosis, blah, blah, blah jargon. But it's all true. It's all sort of panned out that way, which is challenging. It's kind of what we're kind of addressing,
But look on the other way. Michael Rockefeller, he disappeared in Papua New Guinea. And then it was then called Dutch New Guinea in 1961, and they reckon he was eaten by the Asmat tribe. And
are you suggesting, Eric, that we drop all the bankers off with the Asmat tribe? Is that what you're suggesting? Are you saying that we send them out
excellent
there?
idea. With recipes, of course, which they could,
Here's the best way to eat me. Here's the best way to eat me.
Yeah.
You'll really enjoy eating me with some Brussels sprouts and some onions. Yeah, okay, well, we could do that.
Well, it won't be us, it'd be the bankers. We could drop the bankers off there, and people like Keir Starmer. Mind you, be a bit chewy, he would, wouldn't he? Full of bullshit. But the thing is, the tribe apparently were peed off with Rockefeller, people like Michael Rockefeller, buying up their culture and corrupting their culture. And what happened? He was in a situation where there was a storm, and he decided to swim ashore, and they found him. Nobody knows quite what happened, but it is believed that he was actually eaten. So there we go.
Went down quite nice with a white wine sauce.
So
yeah. Lovely. Yum.
I have a question. I have a question for you. Over there, do you hear this term cultural appropriation? Probably not, because you don't have these,
cultural what?
natives.
Appropriation.
Cultural appropriation, is that something that you
I've heard that one. Yeah. Where people
What do you hear it in relation to?
We hear it. Well, I've heard it in relation to, say, the migrant. Let's call them the migrants, the people that are living here that are not of these islands. the non-indigenous people that are here, I've heard it in relation that they, if they acquire, that they're acquiring our culture, but it's also usually used the other way. It's often used the other way around as well, as if we're picking up other people's cultures, and therefore this somehow makes us either less than or whatever. I'm probably bumbling around a little bit, but I have heard the phrase. What's your take on it, Monika?
Okay, well, so here this is cultural appropriation. What they accuse us of is that if our people, so European stock Canadians, start doing things that are maybe like traditional dance of the Indigenous people or the First Nations people, whatever they want to call themselves, the Indians, or let's say using some other cultural thing that comes clearly from them, then they accuse us of cultural appropriation. And it's a very big negative, like it's a big no, don't do that. That's cultural appropriation. But a couple of things occur to me. We should accuse them of cultural appropriation if we see them driving around in their pickup truck, or if we see them doing any number of things that clearly, or even just using a rifle instead of using an old spear or whatever, or just any of these things. We should then just flip that right back at them and say, well, that's cultural appropriation. Stop it. We don't like that you're appropriating our culture. But the other thing about it is this, that why would they tell us, oh, you shouldn't do that, that's just cultural appropriation? They should feel it as a compliment. If our people want to do something that comes from their culture, wouldn't you say that is actually a compliment to their culture?
Well, I think we would, Monika. I think because that's the way that we think. But they don't think like that. And what I'm led to in thinking about these, I know exactly what you're driving at now. I think it's a secondary level problem. I mean, it's a problem, but it's a second level one. The main problem is we shouldn't be living cheek by jowl in the first place. All of these things, we're attending to what I think are like secondary symptoms of the problem, and that they're going to exhaust us, and that's what they're designed to do. Let's talk about this second and third level aspect, which are symptoms of the problem, whereas the actual problem is nature has defined us as races. Now, and this is difficult, I know, for a lot of people to take on. They go, no, there's this thing called the human race. I've said repeatedly, I'm not in it. I don't know anybody that's in the human race. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. Because once you start adopting that phrase, you're already being dragged into the space that we're all going to come together and get on. And now what you're illustrating, even with this example, is that that's not possible, nor is the amount of energy that it takes to try and make it work a good use of energy. It's completely mad. It's totally inappropriate. It's very, very silly. We got this little quote that floats around from Jared Taylor all the time. And I know I've got question marks about him too, but when I hear something sensible, but I don't care who says it, even if Keir Starmer said it, we'd feature him on this show. So you can expect that we'll never feature him because he's never going to say anything sensible ever or intelligent. But he's asked this question, how do we make multiculturalism work? And he said, well, that's like asking me, how do we make alcoholism work? How do we make living with psychopaths work? It's unworkable. It's a completely pointless goal. And of course, it's that goal, or it's the commie goal of creating global equality, a non-achievable goal, the striving for which is a waste of your life. And I think this is one aspect of why we get resistance from people who've gone down that path. They've committed their life to it, and you're about to introduce facts and things which they don't like very much, which totally contradict the path that they've taken. They've taken the wrong path, and because they're so committed to it, they want to drive everybody else down it too. And we're the sort of people say, we're not coming, sorry, you're daft as a brush. And it's very, very dangerous what you're doing. But these conversations, approaching these topics in this way will never be heard on BBC's Question Time, where a question has not been asked, as far as I'm aware, for about 40 years. Not a proper question, not one of any value. It's all piffle. So that's kind of my take on all of these. I mean, you're absolutely right. And we're always accused of this stuff, but we're going to be. We're going to be accused of everything forever until we separate.
Yes.
It's as simple as that.
Yes, that's it. Because it's part of the make us feel guilty, make us feel bad agenda, isn't it?
It is. It is. If they're not picking you on for that, they'll come up with some other concoction when that one wears a bit thin. And what's happening, of course, this word racist is beginning to wear thin. People go, "You're a racist." I go, "Yeah." I mean, that's my response. And you're not?
Yes.
Why not? You're not a racist yet. It's great being a racist. They go, "What is it?" I don't.
Thank you for noticing.
Yeah, thanks for noticing.
Thank you for
I thought you might know. Please tell me what a racist is, please. And a racist is just somebody that observes that race exists. I mean, I actually get coy and I go, "Well, I'm a race is individual because I see that race is." And
I like that.
Yeah, we've also got the high ground. The high ground is this: if you detect clearly that race is an actuality, which it is. Right, it's not a cultural construct, as the Marxists want to blather on. Another attempt, a very effective one, all their attempt to hijack language and make you think contradictory thoughts at the same time. But if it's the situation that race absolutely exists, which it does, and we differentiate on that. In other words, we have a policy of discriminating on race, which we do, which everybody does, right? It's just, but apparently white guys are doing it all the time. And when a white guy does it, it's really negative, which is more horse manure, and fuel to the fire. We are actually more respectful of the natural condition of all races than anybody that's saying the way that you prove you're not a racist is by all trying to live together and kill one another. They're actually the ultimate racist by telling you that you can't notice that race exists, because it does. It absolutely exists.
Tell the doctors in the medical profession that there's no such thing as race, and then all of a sudden you're going to have all these people dying from getting the wrong treatment because doctors, the medical profession, I'm not trying to praise the medical profession, but when, they have to treat differently because of different, what do you call it? I mean, other people will know a lot more about this than me, but so they know there's differences between the races when it comes to treatments for certain things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose, wouldn't vets know? Vets probably don't go as hard on a poodle or whatever in operations as they would on, say, a Rottweiler. They're different. Yeah. They're just, no one sits around and goes, "Well, there's this thing called a dog." There isn't. There are breeds of dog, like there are breeds of human beings. They're breeds. We're all different breeds. They're very distinct. I know that humans have mucked around with the interbreeding of dogs and all this kind of stuff, but it's not good. I mean, the other day I was walking along the sea. I walk along the seafront every day, and I see many, many dog walkers. One of these dogs came along. The body was 1.5 feet long, and its legs were 6 inches. You know what they call sausage dogs? Is that what they call them? They're ridiculous creatures. I mean, they're quite sweet if you're into dogs and all that, but I never understood the point of it. I'm thinking, that's not natural. That didn't come about in nature. These are creatures that are literally the product of being kept as pets in civilized spaces for a long time, and somebody mucking about with dogs and breeding certain things. You've got those little, pug dogs that can barely breathe. They've been so interbred. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't understand what people are doing, and I've never understood that. I've never really if you want a dog, you want something like an Alsatian. You want a proper dog, don't you? Or a sheepdog. Well, I would. I'm not a dog type person, but I'm just saying it's pretty clear in the animal kingdom. And if you look at how animals behave, there's the model, because they're much more naturally, pun intended, connected to nature. Whereas we are apparently sophisticated and can work these things out, and it's all to the detriment of the natural order of things, which works. The creator did not get it wrong. It's absolutely right the way it works. But there's certain breeds of human beings that have got it absolutely wrong because they're going around playing God. Oh, we've all got to come together. It's a menace. It's a very dangerous ideology that harms everyone. And of course, the first reaction when it's a white guy speaking is, "You're a racist." This is and it shuts the conversation down. And nobody wants to stand up and go, "I don't think this is right." And I don't hate these people. Many of them are really good. There's no two ways about it. They are. Many of our own people are very bad. I'm completely aware of that as well. That's no argument either. It doesn't hold water with me. I go, okay, if we've got some bad people, we are the best people to know how to deal with our own bad people, just as they are the best people to know how to deal with their bad people. And it's complicated, and yet all the arguments never get to this point of really understanding it. All these migrants, for example, that are coming here, the long-term result is going to be that everybody won't benefit. Because white people apply their own standards. They say, well, they're coming here for a better standard of living. What does that mean? They get a washing machine. Are they going to be happy? What's that got to do with anything? I don't know what they really want. They've been coaxed into thinking they've all got to have a Mercedes and a big watch and somehow life's going to be great. It's not. We know, because we're the people that built all this stuff, that stuff doesn't fill sort of the spiritual void. It's nonsense. These are toys, and they're nice, and they're very attractive if you can afford them when you're young. But, it's all a bit... I find it all a bit weird. It's a bit like seeing these fat middle-aged blokes that buy Ferraris. You're going, what are you doing? I mean, I do. I think it's sad beyond belief that they do that. Oh, no, I've always wanted one of these. Yeah, but you can barely get into the chair, you fat oaf. But people do this sort of stuff, don't they? They just do it. So... And I don't know if I'd mentioned last week about Africa. Was it last week? I don't know if it was this show, Eric, or yours. Our terrible track record in Africa and slavery and all this kind of stuff. And there was, it's worth repeating again, there was an African king, can't remember his name, in the 1800s. He killed 2 million other Africans, 2 million. The Brits didn't get anywhere near that number. And whilst we were out there, many of the people from the tribes that were being attacked by this other African king came over to live with the British for protection behind the stockades. You don't hear anything about that. No, of course you don't. I'm not saying that colonialism works either. That's not what I'm arguing. But it's even the story of South Africa is not a straight up deal. I don't buy into all this stuff. People are not aware that place was basically uninhabited. It was a stopover point. Has anybody seen how big Africa is? Is it, maybe it's all theirs. So if it's all theirs because of the colour of their skin, according to Marxist things or whatever, right, then the whole of Europe is ours due to the colour of our skin. So can we just everybody go home and then we can relate properly? You want to relate through trade? We can do that. We do it through a civilised discourse, and we do it through certain locations where you discuss these things. But you don't just sort of rock up. To contradict myself as well, because it's not all one-way traffic. We had a clip on here from, I've got it somewhere floating around. I don't need to play it. It was the leading lady of Sierra Leone. And this is a recording made within the last 18 months, 2 years, something like that. She was talking about the predatory international corporations, British, American and Chinese, that were coming into Sierra Leone and basically stripping it of much of its mineral wealth, the stuff that's in the ground. And she said for every $100 million worth of stuff that they take out of the country, we get paid $100,000. And this is out of order. So, the corporations are effectively large-scale criminal gangs, plundering people, perverting governments with money, same old money power thing. And it's commerce. The merchants of the earth are, as, laid down in the Bible, they're the enemy. The great merchants are definitely a key part of the problems of this world because they are obsessed with making profit because of this sick financial system that we have to endure, which compels them to do these things. So they keep banging on and banging on. We need more growth. No, you don't. Why don't we just... it's ridiculous. It's not even the right word, isn't ridiculous, but it's awful. It's a terribly idiotic state of affairs caused by people who are compelled by market forces. Economic news is just deranged. It's deranged, really. They go, oh, we've got to make more cars. Nobody says what would actually make for a balanced world. They go, no, this company's got to make more cars because its stock price will fall. So what? And who cares? We're not bothered. But everybody's hooked into the greed thing. It's the internal fight, I suspect, with everybody. It's like, but I've got to make more money. Do you? Yeah, I've got to. I've got to make more money. I need more stuff. And that compulsion is very strong. It's very strong.
Let's talk about Rothschild and the matriarch of the Rothschild family. I forgot her first name now. Who said
Betty?
Because you're talking about greed and money and merchants and this and that. Okay, let's just go to the Rothschild matriarch and what she said. She said, and she had 5 sons. They had 5 sons, and she said, if my sons did not want war, there would be no war.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just bring it to that point. And Yeah. What group of people did they belong to?
I'm going to read something about that group of people. And this, I am. I could read loads from this document. I've called this show The Nameless War. We're an hour and 50 minutes into it, and I've not even mentioned it. We can't sit on the whole show with it. It's about 50 A4 pages. It's 100 pages of a paperback, right? The Nameless War by Captain Archibald Maule Ramsay. So a quick shout out. Anybody heard of this document? I just want to know. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you might not have read it.
No.
Have you read it, Eric? You ever read it? No.
No.
It doesn't matter. It's
No, I
not a
haven't read
test.
it.
I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. I'm just sort of trying to get the lie of the land. Okay. So I want to give you a bit of background to it. I've got it down. If you were to say to me, Paul, not that people do say that, what would be 5 really top-notch documents to read about the situation? This would be on the list. A, because it's brief, it's concise, and it's crystal clear. It was written in 1952 by a guy with the wonderful name of Captain Archibald Maule Ramsay. It's a great name, isn't it? And he was an MP in Britain just up to the start of World War II. And then under section, whatever it is, 38B, they had this... they locked up anybody that they thought could prove to be problematic during the management of the hullabaloo. And Ramsay was one of these. The other guy I mentioned was Admiral Barry Domville, who wrote this wonderful book called From Admiral to Cabin Boy. He, too, along with his wife, was locked up for about 3.5 years during the war. Domville was locked up because he was heading up the an Anglo-German club to ensure peace between the two countries. There were many, many people over here in high positions of power who were all taken out of that power. They weren't killed, but they were basically sectioned, and they went to Wandsworth Prison, many of them, of which Ramsay was one. And after he was released, the very next day, this is just sort of a backup to the book, he went straight back to the Houses of Parliament and just went straight back in. It's a very interesting guy. And he looks like one of the guys that you would expect from Britain in the 1940s. Okay, really sharp, turned out. Anyway, the prologue's worth reading and a couple of other... Let me just read you the prologue because this is a great essence of it. It says this: Edward I banished the Jews from England for many grave offences, endangering the welfare of his realm and lieges, which were to a great extent indicated in the Statutes of Jewry enacted by his Parliament in 1290, the Commons playing a prominent part. The King of France very shortly followed suit, as did other rulers in Christian Europe. So grave did the situation for the Jews in Europe become that an urgent appeal for help and advice was addressed by them to the Sanhedrin, then located at Constantinople. The appeal was sent over the signature of Chamor, the rabbi of Arles in Provence, on the 13th of January 1489. The reply came November 1489, which was issued over the signature of VSS VFF, Prince of the Jews. It advised the Jews of Europe to adopt the tactics of the Trojan horse, to make their sons Christian priests, lawyers and doctors, and work to destroy the Christian structure from within. The first notable repercussion to this advice occurred in Spain in the reign of Ferdinand and Isabella. Many Jews were by then enrolled as Christians, but, remaining secretly Jews, were working to destroy the Christian church in Spain. So grave became the menace, finally, that the Inquisition was instituted in an endeavour to cleanse the country from these conspirators. Once again, the Jews were compelled to commence an exodus from yet another country whose hospitality they had abused. Trekking eastwards, these Jews joined other Jewish communities in Western Europe. Considerable numbers flowed on to Holland and Switzerland. From now on, these two countries were to become active centres of Jewish intrigue. Jewry, however, has always needed a powerful seafaring nation to which to attach itself. Great Britain, newly united under James I, was a rising naval power which was already beginning to sway the four corners of the discovered world. Here also there existed a wonderful field for disruptive criticism, for although it was a Christian kingdom, yet it was one most sharply divided as between Protestant and Catholic. A campaign for exploiting this division and fanning hatreds between the Christian communities was soon in process of organisation. How well the Jews succeeded in this campaign in Britain may be judged from the fact that one of the earliest acts of their creature and hireling, Oliver Cromwell, after executing the king according to plan, was to allow the Jews free access to England once more. And that's the prologue. And it lays out in very crisp, clean and concise language certain key moments throughout history, of which we are now in the latest one of this long line. And I'll just give you some of the, I'll give you there's how many chapters in it? 12. Here's the titles of them. Certainly. The first one is the British Revolution. Then the French is chapter 2. The Russian is the third. The development of revolutionary techniques. Germany bells the cat is chapter 5. 1933, Jewry declares war. 7, phony war ended by civilian bombing. 8 is Dunkirk and after. 9, the shape of things to come. 10, President Roosevelt's role. 11, Regulation 18B. That's the one he got locked up. So it was 18. I got my numbers wrong. And 12 was Who Dares. And then there's an epilogue. It's actually a brilliantly useful document, and one that you can always go back to and just to remind yourself of key things. But this is the Nameless War, and we're in it right now. It's not ended, as I know you around the microphones here know. But that's, I just thought I'd throw that in just to stimulate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think I'll order that. The Nameless War.
Yeah, you'll get it as a PDF on welib.org. It's up there. Okay, if you go to this library, you'll get it there.
I don't like reading books online. You think it's available in print?
Yeah, probably. We need to set up a publishing house, Monica. We do, but we can't ship books to another because it costs 50 quid to send them across the water or whatever it is. It's a sort of ludicrous price. But it's 1952 when he published this. It was basically went down the memory hole as quickly as possible, but it's extremely concise and right to the point. And much of the early bit on the British Revolution is based on. I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs here, and then we can just let it float. But the British Revolution starts as this. This is how it opens. He says, "It was fated that England should be the first of a series of revolutions which is not yet finished." This is a quote. And Ramsay writes, he said, "With these cryptic words, Isaac Disraeli, the father of Benjamin, the Earl of Beaconsfield, who went on to become the British Prime Minister under Victoria, commenced his 2-volume life of Charles I, published in 1851, a work of astonishing detail and insight, much information for which he states was obtained from the records of one Melchior de Salom, French envoy in England during that period." And it goes on to explain a view of England, as Isaac Disraeli describes it, based upon Christianity and ancient traditions, with common law, Magna Carta. These things are still here, and the power centre as it existed. And we get now down to the usual nub of it, Eric, which is usury, pretty early on, when he starts to talk about Calvin.
Yeah.
Calvin, who is the man who said, "A little bit of usury is okay." No, Jean Calvin, it is not. No, none of it is. And they laid the groundwork for the discord in England, which resulted in the so-called Reformation. And these events, I know when we talk about it, they go, well, that's 500 years ago. No, it's not. It's right now. These things, the echoes of these decisions are with us very strongly, because these people faced, the good people of the time faced the same problems that we're facing right now. An invasion of their power centres, the corruption of high officials for money, the lies. I mean, it's the thing that led up to the English Civil War. Some of the statistics.
This session is no longer being recorded.
Oh, sorry about that. Some of the things that led up to it are absolutely incredible. The number of pamphlets that were printed. Right, this is England in the 1640s. Over 30,000, that's different written ones. I don't mean 30,000 copies. 30,000 pamphlets were printed and distributed to create a mob. And the model that was used to create the so-called English Civil War, which wasn't English at all, as you can probably imagine, was exactly the same model they used in France. Echoes of it were found in the Russian Revolution. You've probably got a similar type of model to bring about the war between the states in America. This is this nameless thing, and it's it's a bloody useful document. That's all I'll say. It's very useful. I would, if you've not read it, everybody, and you're curious to know in quick time, it's as good a primer as you're ever likely to find. It's an excellent document.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But the trouble is that my theory is that whenever people get close to finding out,
we're near the end, Eric. Eric, we're near the end. Sorry. Eric,
okay.
I've got to talk over you. I've just got to talk over you because we're right near the end of our slot on WBN and I nearly missed it. So bye-bye, everybody on WBN. If you want to carry on listening, we're at paulenglishlive.com. All the links are there. We'll be back again at the same time next week. Sorry about that. I got so carried away blagging on there about the Civil War. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone. Bye for now.
It already stopped recording a minute or two ago. That was when you said
that was an invasive thing. Don't worry about that. No, that's another connection that comes into the studio here, so that's not really a problem. That's not really a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know you were so into the subject that I thought, well, maybe you didn't quite catch the words, but it just said that.
No, I heard it, but it doesn't affect what we're doing. It's a little confusing, but don't worry about it, Monica.
No.
It's just another studio that's connected up to us. It's fine. Don't worry about that.
You're the techie, and you've got all the experience. I don't, so I have no business talking about that. But you were on a really great go there, telling us about that, and I would like to have that in my hands. I think it would be a good little resource document to have the Nameless War well explained, and it is exact. But you were just about to say something about. Oh, maybe Eric was about to say something about.
Was.
Yeah, the trouble is.
I'm sorry, Eric. I just had to get that in at the end there. Eric, please get the mic.
I fully understand. Not a problem. Now, what I was going to say is before the First World War, there was a run on the banks, and people were starting to wake up to the facts about usury. And even though it took about 20 years of propaganda to start the First World War, because there was a lot of anti-German propaganda, started in the 1890s. So if there was a fire somewhere, it was German undercover agents that started it. No, it's just a fire. That type of thing. But also people were waking up to the fact that there's usury. And what do we have? World War One. Then in between World War One and World War Two, people are starting to wake up about usury. And Mr. H abolishes usury in 1933 when he got into power. And of course, people were learning about it even more. So what do they have? Another war. Because let's face it, it's about the first time a country has declared war on another country when the other country is actually advancing away from them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bonkers when you think about it. And, the German army was marching into Poland. And we know for what reason.
Yeah.
And people are asking, well, hang on, what's it got to do with us? It's got nothing to do with us at all. But what it has got a lot to do with is bankers, because they wanted Germany totally destroyed in case other countries got the idea of, wonder if it might be a good idea if we abolish usury. And that's really what I think it's all about.
It's repeated. You're right, Eric. It's repeated in so many ways up and down the historical line from the books that you can't get, but you can get if you look for them. They do exist. You have to get them as PDFs. And someone, Monica, by the way, has suggested that I'll send you the PDF of it. If you've got a printer, it would be the fastest and cheapest and easiest way for you to get it and just print it off. It's only about 120 pages, so 60 pages of paper both sides. It'll do. I mean, if you want a book, they'll probably charge you an arm and a leg for a book. I'm just saying, there's so much to read in it. But
that's a good idea. I'll go to the local library. I don't have a printer at home, and usually I go to the library to get things printed on. I'll just see if I can print it off there now. If those very woke lesbian librarians looked.
I hope you go in and say that. Morning, woke lesbians. Can I get some printing done? Hi. Exactly. Hello, lesbians. Yeah, that's how you do it. All nice and cheery.
It's true.
It is. That's what you have to do. I'll tell you why I jumped into the document, actually. There was an interview that James Dellingpole did recently with a guy called Burlingame. I'm going to do a terrible. I only listened to the first 15, 20 minutes. I've not had time to pick it up, and I think it's going to be great. And everybody said it's a very good interview. And he's a sort of ex-special forces guy, and he's going into the whole thing. But I had a big issue with what he was saying in the first 15 minutes, the way he was phrasing it. What he said was, and this is to do with the English Civil War, and this is what prompted me to jump back into this document, because it's as good a one as any in terms of covering ground quickly. And you need this. It's all right saying, like you said, something. Here's a 20,000-page report. Stick it up your bum, mate. If you can't get it over in a couple of pages, you can't get it over. I'm not listening to you. I mean, I think that really there needs to be a law against excessive verbiage. I mean it. It's absolutely mad. Laser printers have become a curse. People just copy and paste. Go, here's your 300-page report, Brian. You go, no, I want 300 paragraphs, right? I want it on 8 pages. I need you. In the past, people couldn't afford to sit around and well, they didn't have laser printers. People had to write it out or type it out. So there's a clarity of thinking that's missing. It's fluff. It's just yeah.
Speaking of what you're mentioning here, I've had the privilege of reading some older writings lately, whether it be articles or pamphlets or whatever, maybe 100 years, 150 years old, whatever. Yeah. And I've been amazed at the quality of the writing, the clarity of thinking, the precision of expressing ideas. We have gone downhill. Oh my goodness, we have been dumbed down generally. And they really, the quality of literature and writing in general was so superior
to
what it is now.
It's off the charts.
I'm amazed. But we always had this notion pumped into us somehow or other in school or whatever, that we're always progressing, we're always getting better, whether it's in the sciences, whether it's in our wisdom and our how civilized we are or how humane we are. All these things, we're just always told that we're always on an upward trajectory. Well, no, I think that we've come pretty low right now in general, the state of our civilization, the state of our thinking and clarity and whatnot. We're kind of at a low point right now, I would say, don't you think?
Yep. Yeah, we're getting more and more stupid.
Yeah.
We are. It's to do with sort of becoming distant from the idea of intellectual effort. So thinking, this is just my take on it. If you ever actually really do thinking, and I'm going to go on the basis that we all do, when you're doing it, it's often very hard. It's just hard in your head. You're trying to work out a problem or something, and you can tell when someone can think because they've got a funny look on their face. You don't see that. Everybody's a little bit more vacuous because there's far too much instantaneous pleasure. I do sound like a middle-aged old fart, but there's a good reason in it. If we go back, say, to the 1800s, I've mentioned this before, but it's yet another point that's worth repeating. All you had was literature. There wasn't anything else. No one could afford anything else. You might be able to afford to go to the theatre every now and again, but that's short and sweet. You couldn't afford to go to the opera. You probably couldn't afford to go to a classical orchestra. Not if you're a normal working class bod in the 1800s. Maybe you had a bit more disposable income in the States. No doubt you did, right? But over here, it was still pretty tough. I mean, this is what Dickens was writing about. The sort of, all these hovels and things that he's talking about, the sucking in of all the people off the land into London and elsewhere in these industrial centres, and the sheer grime and grind of life and how they were being taken advantage of. This is a sort of backbone to his stuff. He writes for what would be called, penny dreadfuls? He wrote for magazines. So you could argue, say, well, the language is extremely sort of expansive. Of course it is. He had pages to fill, but it's not dull. If you read his stuff, and it takes a little time to get adjusted to it because you have to go, the plot's not moving as quick as a TV series. No, it's not doing that. What it's doing is it's actually giving you insight into all the factors that are bearing down on all the characters, why they're doing this stuff. And it's complex, and there's a much more refined intelligence behind the writing because that's all they had. And, I often marvel at Dickens. I don't know how many gallons of ink he went through. I wish there was a gallanometer because he wrote that stuff with a quill and an ink pot. And he's seen the size of these novels. I don't know what it was like. I mean, it's quite amazing. But there's an intellectual force behind it. So writers are basically thinkers that get their thoughts down on paper more effectively than anybody else. And it's a great It's a great skill, and it's a great art in many ways. And it's been one of the most powerful things, and remains one of the most powerful things, because we tend to absorb information far more effectively, I think, through emotional stories than we do through fact. We cover a lot of fact here, and we want to, because we've been denied a lot of these facts, these truths. We've been denied them. But if we were able to take them and put them into sprightly stories, I suspect they'd have much greater reach, and they would have more emotional connection with the reader. People need to understand that there's an emotional part of life which is almost unmeasurable by science, thankfully. I mean, what are feelings all about, really? Why do you have feelings? Well, I don't know, but I bloody well have them, I'm telling you. And they're amazing, and you kind of don't know where they come from. And they're able to encapsulate all of those sorts of things. So the standard of writing has dropped on both sides of the Atlantic and across Europe. And even those Russian writers, which are always portrayed as being very highbrow, they're not. If you get into them, the short stories of Chekhov, for example, of course, as soon as you say Chekhov, you go, oh, you're a bit snotty about things. Because that's how they've been portrayed. And the way that those paperbacks were even published when I was a teenager in the 70s, they always had very dark covers, as if it was the most serious stuff in the world. Well, it is. It's the Russian mind at work. But I remember reading something from a translator that had translated War and Peace, and I remember reading it when I was 18, and I did it almost like, not because I really wanted to read it, but I looked at the size of it on the bookshelf in 2 parts. I went, look at the size of that thing. I'm just going to read it because it's so big. It's perverse, really, but I did. It's absolutely amazing book, by the way. It's absolutely stunning. It's like a boy's own. It's an amazing story, and it's really well done. But the guy that did the translation, I remember, or one of them on these, said he felt that something magical occurs when Russian is translated into English. And I think there is. There's a plainness about it. And you think, oh, this is not very colourful. But it is. You get to fill in a lot with your imagination. And this is where you grow, I think, intellectually, and in terms of your powers of observation and what you're looking for. Because the powers of these guys' observations are off the charts. We're all goofed out behind screens half the time, so nobody has enough thinking time. But I am going on a bit, aren't I? Am I banging on?
Society is in shock, though, isn't it?
I think so, yes.
Sorry, carry on, Monica.
Well, I was just going to ask you to repeat the title of the one book that you specifically mentioned there that you read.
War and Peace?
Was it War and Peace that was so big, so long? So who was the author?
Leo Tolstoy.
Yeah, okay. Geez, too bad my friend Kathleen isn't on this part of the discussion. She's been absolutely addicted to reading the Russian authors, Russian works, Russian books lately in the last year, I guess. And
really?
My goodness. It's just become an addiction for her.
Well, after the show, let's arrange to get her on and we could do a short thing, because I'm sure, I don't know if everybody really wants to know about Russian authors, and it's not as if I'm super knowledgeable. All I know is when I shifted to sort of reading those things, I used to read a lot of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and these American detectives, and they're brilliant in their own way. And then I got into looking at Chekhov, and there's a French short story writer called Guy de Maupassant who writes these short stories. And when you read these short stories, they're just amazing. They've always got a twist in them. And I'm going, where's all this come from? And it's just general life. The Russian stuff's got a magic to it. It does. When I read it, and of course, War and Peace is about Napoleon. It's about the Napoleonic Wars. And it gives you a very detailed sort of background of what's happening in the Russian court and in France and all these sorts of things. And it lays it out in such a way. And I'm thinking, where did you get all the material from? But Tolstoy was highborn, and he moved in those circles, and he must have been able to get first-hand reports and accounts of the whole of that sort of period history. And he pulls it together in an amazing story that's got meaning because it really happened, I think. And I think that's part of the magic of the whole thing. Not that I'm suggesting everybody goes off and reads War and Peace. I just did it because I was trying to improve my level of concentration when I was younger. I was really cross with myself for not being able to read more than 5 pages. I'm going, oh, you idiot. We can't deal with this. So I just set tasks of trying to find the biggest books I could. I'm going, I'm absolutely going to read this, even when I was a bit bored with certain bits of it, all the kissy bits, and stuff like that. We're not interested in that. All the battle scenes, of course, are absolutely amazing when you're an adolescent boy. It's just absolutely stunning stuff. But they wrote. Let's put it this way: they wrote better. But just coming back to this thing about why I just brought the Nameless War in and this guy Burlingame, in the first 15 minutes or so, and I could easily be wrong about this, I'm actually sort of judging the whole thing on these first 15 minutes, and I understand that this is absolutely wrong. But he mentioned, when he was talking about the English Civil War, he said that Cromwell was basically fighting to defend this country against a corporate takeover from Holland. And I went, what? What are you talking about? And I want to read you something about Cromwell. And I don't know, I mean, maybe Burlingame knows this or whatever, and maybe he develops it into something that I'd find more easier to digest. I'm just going on the first 15 minutes, which I know is wrong, but at least it gives me the excuse to mention this, okay? This is the Civil War, and it's what's going on over here. And I just want to read you a bit about Cromwell so that everybody knows what a complete SH1T was, right? These things need to be known, because even now there's a statue of Cromwell outside the Houses of Parliament, right? And if I get in, that's going to be turned into a urinal as soon as I can possibly do it. He writes this. He says, "The scene now changes. The Civil War has taken its course. The year is 1647. Naseby, a big battle, has been won and lost. The king," this is Charles I, "is virtually a prisoner, while treated as an honoured guest at Holmby House. According to a letter published in a magazine called Plain English on the 3rd of September 1921, and I'll read it, it says this: "The learned elders have been in existence for a much longer period than they have perhaps suspected. My friend, Mr. L.D. van Valkert of Amsterdam, has recently sent me a letter containing 2 extracts from the synagogue at Mulheim. The volume in which they are contained was lost at some period during the Napoleonic Wars, and has recently come into Mr. van Valkert's possession. It is written in German, and contains extracts of letters sent and received by the authorities of the Mulheim synagogue. The first entry he sends me is of a letter, received on the 16th of June 1647, from Oliver Cromwell to Ebenezer Pratt." This is Cromwell writing. "In return for financial support, will advocate admission of Jews into England. This, however, impossible while Charles living. Charles cannot be executed without trial, adequate grounds for which do not at present exist. Therefore, advise that Charles be assassinated," Cromwell wrote this, "but will have nothing to do with arrangements for procuring an assassin, though willing to help in his escape." He gets a reply back about a month later from Pratt to Oliver Cromwell. "Will grant financial aid as soon as Charles removed and Jews admitted. Assassination too dangerous. Charles shall be given opportunity to escape. His recapture will make trial and execution possible. The support, i.e. to Cromwell, will be liberal, but useless to discuss terms until trial commences." So it's just that everybody in England knows that Cromwell, and his surname begins with C, as did Churchill, not a good man for this nation. And when I heard sort of Burlingame say this, I thought, I don't think so. Really, I just don't think so at all. Because, the big question, coming back to banking, where did Cromwell get all the money from for the new model army? Well, I'll tell you, he got it from a guy called Fernandez Carvajal, the great Jew of Europe, who was very wealthy and provided and also supplied armaments to all armies across Europe. And he was in London at the time. That's where they got it from. You can't have a war without money for horses, troops, guns, daggers, all the other crap and armour. And the new model army, which of course sounds commie, it really does to me, it's a very sort of strange thing, was paid for by these guys. So that Cromwell was, as Ramsay said early on, their creature and hireling, which he was. Yeah, we've got him to thank for nothing. And this is in the 1650s. And then we only have to go ahead 40 years to 1694, and they get the prize that all this was for, the Bank of England. And that's what this was all about, I would suggest. Same old, same old.
Wow.
History repeats itself. Always has done, always will do.
Yep.
But it's amazing how there is always a hidden hand that owns the media that sets the sort of tone. For example, after World War II, people like my father were talked down and ignored because they told the story that the media didn't want the masses to know, because what they wanted the masses to know is that veterans love to march around wearing their medals and saluting and all this and this kind of bellicose attitude. But not all veterans were like that, because we had a conscript army. And this is the thing, people are ignored, and a scene is set. And my father had people telling him what the war was like when they weren't even there, they weren't even old enough.
Yes.
And things like that. I mean, Monica, I wonder if your father had the same, where people were telling him what the war was like, even though they weren't even born at the time.
Well, I don't know. It's a bit different situation. I think we didn't really talk often about the war. But as far as my father saying those things, that people telling him about things about the war, I mean, then there's the whole story about, the invented story there that we're not allowed to really openly discuss on this show.
The thingy.
The thingy. And
yes.
Did my parents come to believe that? I think they did. I just think about how my mother reacted when I reprimanded her for not doing more to stop all those horrors. That was when I was a teenager, so that would have been, let's see, I was born in 59, 69, 70s, mid-70s. And she says, well, we just didn't know. We didn't know. We knew there were work camps, but we didn't hear anything else until much later, which is very accurate. They heard these things much later, right? Long after the war was over. But she was being very accurate. And then my father, once in a while, he did tell us that Mr. H, as you called him, I'll just, follow suit. He did some good things, and we never hear about those good things. And he was then saying, like, he did some really good things in Germany. So he was talking about, in the 1930s. He did some really good things. So I do remember that, and I think our eyes glazed over a little bit. And because we were so programmed by our schooling that we didn't talk against what he said. I think I remember for myself, I'll just speak for myself, I just remember him saying those things, but it didn't really want to register deeply. I heard him, and he said those things, and I think I absorbed it somehow, but it wasn't really, I guess, in harmony with the things that I had already been pummeled with in school.
I can understand that, yeah. Because I think the big difference between your father and mine is my father had untreatable shell shock, which is very, very, very different. So I was actually hearing it day after day after day.
Yeah,
I mean, if you start me off talking about World War II, I'm like a steam engine. I just keep going on and on, because I had it drummed into me from such an early age. And I'm not complaining, because my poor old dad, I mean, we were like twins. We were very close, my dad and I. But he didn't understand, shell shock is a terrible thing, because it's like a gramophone record that gets stuck in the groove. So people, they see these horrors day after day, and it is very, very horrific. But going on to what I was saying earlier, I believe the fear, I mean, that lockdown, what it did throughout the world, it put people into a sense of fear. And when you look at what the Frankfurt School were doing in the 1920s and 30s, they were torturing dogs to see how they would react and how they could control them. And can you imagine someone doing that for a living? Daddy, what do you do at work today? Well, dear, I tortured some doggies, and that's the sort of people they were. And you notice it's constant fear porn all the time. Fear, fear, fear. And when a person is fearful, they revert to a child mentality. It can be temporary, it can be long-term, it can be almost anything. But I've noticed loads of things are becoming childlike now. Very embarrassingly childlike. Have you noticed that at all, Paul, Monica?
Definitely.
We've become immature.
Definitely. Yes, definitely immature. And it's almost an insult to children to keep comparing, this imbecile behavior. But I know exactly what you're saying. It's an immaturity. Perhaps that's, reverting to a state where they have not matured, and their emotional state is not mature. Their intellectual state is not mature. So yeah, definitely. And just back to what you were saying about your father and my father, yes, they had very, very different wartime experiences. For my father, the most trying experience was post-war, because he was in one of Eisenhower's camps, the meadows, the Rheinwiesen Lager, the meadows there where they were, surrounded by barbed wire fence and had nothing but their utensil, the spoon, to maybe dig an impression into the ground to get away from the elements, where healthy men came in and within 2 weeks they were crawling on the ground to reach what was a makeshift latrine, which was just a ditch among the many people, and they were taking out truckloads of corpses every day. So that was the most traumatic. And then in 1989, when the book by James Bach was published, Other Losses, and it was written up in a mainstream magazine. I think it was called Saturday or Saturday Night Magazine, something like that. I'll never forget, because my father, he had this in his hands and he was pacing around the house, and if I was to describe to you what was his emotional state at that point, I would just say it was a truckload of emotions, everything ranging from relief to anger to everything. Just, he says, look, finally, they're talking about what was done to Germany and to the Germans. They're only ever telling you about what, those so-called evil Germans did to everybody else. But look. And he was just beside himself, because he had been in one of those, and we really had never heard anything about that until then, I think. I don't recall if he had talked about it before then, but then it's almost like, okay, I can talk about this now, because he had been in one of those camps, and he estimates that between 1/3 and 1/4 of the men who were in that meadow where he was, I call it a meadow, that sounds so nice, but that field surrounded by barbed wire, between 1/3 and 1/4 of them didn't make it out alive, just died, perished, starved, was ill, just perished, so
Terrible.
Yeah.
Because there was actually a plan to sterilize the whole of Germany, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's
was
like separate. That was like Theodor Kaufmann, who got that book published in 1941. But yes, I mean, there's been many plans to basically kill all of Germans, like just get rid of them, and it just had to do with their strength, and the hatred of the Germans by that certain tribe.
Yeah, but it's thanks to the Cold War that really saved the day in many ways. But then we know who was behind the Cold War as well. So it's was it all roads lead to Rome, and it always leads to a certain area, which I can't go into because we're in Great Britain.
The Nameless War, Eric. That's what it is. It's nameless.
Yes.
It doesn't have a name, and it's always an event, and everything's happening by accident, and it's always an emergency, and there's always something to be scared of, and it's all manipulated, every single last bit. I keep thinking about when Eli was on last week, and we're looking at the Hazard Circular about how the greenback was not instituted as the actual currency of America, which it should be to this day. Because if you think America's thriving now, I can't imagine what it would have been like if you'd have had that, right? They keep telling us that we're doing great. Well, no, we're not. I mean, the money system keeps people away from the actual wealth. You can't afford it, apparently, because there's not enough money to go around. Well, there is. It's just that you're not allowed to have it. And it's this weakness, that's probably not the right word, this pattern that is repeated of your so-called leaders, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, succumbing to an external hidden force. And that force gets them through sex. It can dominate their sex energy and get them into all sorts of terrible pickles, which they then become like Woodrow Wilson and stuff like this. So they'll use that. There's just downright greed. And obviously they're targeting those individuals that find it rather easy to become a traitor to their own people. As Paul was saying right at the beginning of the show, that quote from Cicero, that the traitor within is the real problem. And this problem never seems to go away. And maybe we shouldn't expect it to go away. So the question would be is, what is it that we're not doing that we need to do that would mean it would be very difficult for those sorts of people to operate? The problem that you have is even when they've been overthrown, they come back. It's like a fungus. It's like a virus. It's a behavioral flaw. And they say it's in the whole of human beings. Well, it's not. It's not in the whole of human beings, but it's certainly in a substantial minority such that they are willing to do things of great harm, including world wars, to get their way. And I don't... It's a tricky one. Well, if you look at, say, the basis of Christian ethics and morals, which is where, whatever people may think, is where all the good stuff comes from, in very simple terms, how difficult it is to actually enact them when you've got people that will literally take advantage of what you could say is organized good nature. Honorable law is based on decency and people telling the truth, those quaint old-fashioned things. But when people are not telling the truth, like the political arena all the time, you're living in the great, diversion marathon. And that's really, we've been living in that for a long time, going all the way back to Rome and before that, and so on and so forth. So it might just not be possible to do it. Maybe the thing is you go, well, look, the people that really want to run civilization, they always end up running it. They always end up running it for their benefit at our expense. Is there any means by which we cannot fall under their umbrella? There may well be. I mean, there are all sorts of, you can often find, time. You can create time for yourself, which is peaceful and where you can remind yourself of the good things in life. But I think for people like us, it always keeps pressing down that this is such a mediocre effort. And I'm being kind when I say that. It's so pathetic, the nature of life down here in comparison to what it could be and what we sense very strongly. That's what motivates us, how it ought to be, that it is an affront. It's an absolute affront. And it goes hard with people like us. And I can understand why many people don't want to sort of start asking questions that draw them into this condition where they're effectively unsettled all the time. But that's the price you pay. You will be, I think. You will be uncomfortable a lot of the time. And particularly, when you meet the frustrations of not being able to convince your kith and kin that they're barking up the wrong tree and that there's a fundamental problem right at the heart of all this thing. And what's the point of being good at business if the entire system is built on a banking system that's robbing all your fellow citizens? Yeah. Oh, I don't care about them. I mean, don't you? No. Well, I do, because that's where the real wealth is. What's the point of you having tons of money if everybody around you is miserable, dying, and just having a terrible time? Oh, those plebs. I mean, that's where this attitude has developed from, and it's become an inbred, a sort of emotional disregard for the well-being of your fellow man, which sounds awfully quaint, again, but isn't that the essence of what we're striving for? We value things like that just inherently in terms of, you can see it in our behavior when we're allowed to behave well. So, that's the kind of, I think that's kind of one of the strong emotional planks of the whole thing. Yeah.
I think the two chinks in our army and in our
You're not being racist there, are you?
False, because I say, no, the two, but what I mean to say is a slip of the tongue there.
Yes.
But what I was going to say is that the old saying, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Number one, we don't know our enemy and we don't understand our enemy, but our enemy knows all about us. Now, I think the two chinks in the enemy's armor is, one is their childishness, because they've got a weird kind of childishness, and two is they lack sense of humor and they don't like being laughed at. And I think we've got to be a bit like the Kalahari Bushmen, where when they go out to hunt, they wear an animal down until it collapses with exhaustion. And that's what we've got to do with our enemy. We've got to wear them down until they collapse with exhaustion. And I think we can do it. I really do. It's our only way.
Yeah, we have to stop. You have to put the
ideas?
kettle on every now and again, you see, and make a cup of tea. I'm using that as a metaphor for, I think it's very important for everybody to take time out and just remind yourself regularly about nature and how beautiful it is, and that unfortunately much human behaviour is not very beautiful at all, unfortunately. I can understand why, as people get older, they also almost like want to take themselves out of civilization. I can begin to see it. I could never work it out when I was young. It's just too exciting, you know. I mean, I really enjoyed moving to London in the 80s. I thought it was brilliant. Apart from the fact that I sort of missed a lot of my old friends for a couple of years. It just happened. I didn't realise how hard that would go with me. But when you're young, you're on an adventure, right? It's all going to turn out great. I'm going to, this was me daydreaming in my head. I'm going to create a business and something's going to be great. I'm going to have loads of money and all that. And it's just, what a blast this is. And it did kind of feel like that in England in the 80s because Margaret Thatcher said it was like that, so everybody obeyed as a sort of overall context. But it really disguises a lot of where the real wealth is. And I know it's corny again, and I say this a lot, but it's in family. And so if we look at the end result of all of this invasion of our culture, our power centres particularly, we find it's very, very difficult. It's inordinately and bogusly challenging to create happy families. It's difficult because hurdles are intentionally put in our way to make that possible. And yet, there's a part of me that will, I'm pretty sure, always remain optimistic, as you were saying, Eric, that we can deal with this. We haven't yet fully found a totally coherent or effective way of doing it, but the signs are good. I keep seeing little things. It doesn't take much to get me really sort of positive again. I'm very quick to see a good side. And I think maybe when you've looked at the dark side for so long, maybe that comes with it. I don't mind ploughing through dark information. Not that I necessarily need to do too much more of that, which of course is probably a mistake. There's always something new to learn, but I don't know what practical. It's like I was saying, just about this document, 120 pages, you're going to be given 90% of everything you really need to know. It's worth probably trying to acquire much of the remaining 10 or 20% that it doesn't cover. There are so many different aspects. But for England and the historical timeline, it's very useful. Most people do not know that Cromwell was the major pivot point for the ruination of this nation. He's not alone in that. But that period of history is major because it brings in things like, I answered a comment on the Rumble chat, and thank you everybody on Rumble and YouTube, those of you that are sending in little comments and stuff. I'm looking at them. About this thing about an invasion from Holland. It wasn't. People need to know what made up the power in Amsterdam, and it was the same alien force. Amsterdam is where they had the world's first central bank. It predates the Bank of England. It's where they created stock exchanges. It's where they created corporations. It's where they had the Dutch East India Company. Who do you think's behind all these things? I mean, it's the great merchants of the earth, as Scripture refers to them. And that's really that profit at all costs, including human life. Yep, that's what it's about. That's what wars are all about, aren't they? They want their money. They want their money. Because they don't want you to have it. I think that's the main reason. They can't buy any more helicopters, but they don't want you to get strong. So they keep you weak by having you fight against your brothers in Germany and all this kind of stuff. And it really does make you weep tears of blood. It does at times, metaphorically. It's just, I can't dwell on it too much because it's heartbreaking, which is probably designed to be, I guess. But it is.
And it's brewing up another one now in Iran. And they'll have a false flag, and most of the numpties will believe it. I'm positive they will. And it happens every time. I mean, look what happened in 1939. The beginning of 1939, this country was positively against war, totally against war. But Sefton Delmar and people like that and his merry crew, they managed to, it was absolutely brilliant job that they did of corrupting people's minds. And by the end of 1939, they gave the impression that everyone was pro-war, which of course they weren't. But
you find out that black propaganda is nothing new, is it? It's nothing new.
No,
that's
right.
I mean, leaders going back to Constantine and before that, they just lied. They just lied about stuff. They make stuff up. It goes down as a myth. And I had this great experience and this, that, and that. And it's all complete. Most of it is complete horse. All of it. I mean, I know.
What have we got now?
I was amazed when I read the thing in Ramsey about 30,000 pamphlets in England. 30,000 written. Different ones, right? And there was a big mob in London. And they created a mob through pamphleteering. Think about it. It's just amazing. And that was exactly the same thing that they did in France, in the French Revolution, which is, I mean, when I first started this show early on, a couple of years back, or whenever it was, not 2 years back, but a year and a half back, one of the books we were looking at the time was Nestor Webster's The French Revolution. It's true, I don't really need to keep reading all these things, but it hits you between the eyes as you go through it. Of course, the key thing is, okay, from all this knowledge and information, can we synthesize a new way of behaving that stops it coming about again? I mean, no one's done it before us. That's all I could say. Well, they have, but for such a short period of time. They've done it as a nation. Germany did it. Libya did it.
Yeah.
Other countries have done it. What happens to them? The merchants of the earth threaten all the countries around them with economic destitution if they don't go off and kill this other thing that's pulling itself out of their system, in simple terms. They want everybody there, basically nailed down.
Before it was, this enemy went after regions and individual countries. Now they're going after basically all of us. So the response will also be all of us. And... they've been tossed out many times, and this time, if it's all of us, well, I don't know. That's going to be across the world, and I think maybe they're on their last hurrah.
I think I would like... It is different. There's definitely something... I mean, you mentioned X earlier, Monica, and... Anybody out there that's not just hanging around on X, I'd suggest you do. It's probably worth even getting a silly account just to get a feel for things. The degree of energized communication is very high. It's almost like how the internet was 15 years ago in certain circles. I mean, some of these posts, I'm going, what, really? I mean, there's a guy called Lucas Gage, and he's released a song called Boom Boom Tel Aviv.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It went viral.
It went viral, right? It's awful. I can't stand it. It's one of these electro pop things. But people go, oh, this is a really banging song. I'm not going to play it, by the way. But of course, it's to do with the lyrics. And it got dumped off of all the streaming platforms. But I think you can get it on SoundCloud if you go and type it in as a search. Lucas Gage, Boom Boom Tel Aviv. You'll find it. It's not my kind of thing. It's not the thing I would ever play on this show. It's kind of electro, blah 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 blah.
It's AI. He said it is AI generated. I knew as soon as I heard it because it's not his voice. I know his voice, right?
Yeah.
So and he says that it's AI, and then he was quite astonished and surprised. Says, "Gee, maybe I should put more energy into doing this kind of thing more."
Well, yeah.
Whoops. I just dropped my headphones.
Doesn't this tap into this thing about emotion? That maybe we should just be singing songs as opposed to talking for 3 hours. I mean, I'm thinking about all of these things. I'm serious because, we're used to doing long form chats, okay, and we like to do them. And then I don't know if I was mentioning the last week. I know I talk about this with Eric sort of off air during the week, is to look at how to parcel this information into smaller lumps, sound bites, to get it across. I came across a video. There's a fantastic channel on YouTube called Keltanian Chronicles. And he did a video about 5 or 6 days ago. The title of which is something like, it's a 57 million to 1 chance that the Britons are not the lost tribes of Israel. It's 20 minutes. It's absolutely, for me, sensationally good. And it had like 100,000 views, or 900,000 views in 4 days. There were 3,000 comments. And the comments is such a rich field, very encouraging. People go, yeah. There's a few going, no. But it's a key pivot point of this nameless war. It's the foundation of it, in my view. I mean, there may be other things there are other things that I don't know that come into it. But it was just and he's just looking at historical records and piecing things together. And it's very important because it doesn't include just the Britons. It's the whole of North and Western Europe. And it's why we have the culture that we've got. And it's who we are right down to the very root going back 2,000 and 3,000 years. You go, is that important? I'm going to say it's about as an important a thing as most white people need to know. I'm quite serious about that. Because it's a sort of a light bulb moment that's, for me, that's unlike any other light bulb moment. And the banking stuff was a big deal for me because it just basically took me out of the world. I went, oh, I can't be in this. This is a joke, right? This is just a joke being said at our expense. But the root of who we are as a race, and we're just coming back to this race thing, is massively important. That's why we're able to talk and interact in the way that we do across slightly different cultures, because we've got this racial connection. And as other people do across Africa, I'm assuming, when they're, behaving well. And we've behaved really badly as well. I'm not saying it's just all the other people. We've had, we've got a lot of trouble internally. There's no two ways about that. But when they disturb...
On that note about behavior and whatnot, because people will always come back with there's good and bad in every group, and when you start to try to point out who the enemy is, right? It's always that catch-all or a cop-out. Really is. It's a cop-out, and I think this is the answer to that, or it might be a good answer. My retort to that would be to say, you are right, there are good and bad people in every group of people. However, our holy books, let's just call it that, our holy books or our code of ethics tells us to be good. Their code of ethics books or their holy books tells them to be bad. In a nutshell, don't you think? That's their operating system is actually one of great evil. And our operating system, the instructions that we go by in life, whether that is the holy book or whether that is, the natural law that you live by or God's law or, basically common law, they tell us to be good. Basic good behavior. Do not kill, do not cheat, do not steal. These kinds of things. Basically be good to each other. And theirs is the opposite. That's the difference. So when there are bad apples within our group, we deal with them. And we don't approve of it, whereas when there are bad apples in their group, well, that's actually a good apple. And they say, yeah, we're cheering you on. The badder, the better. The badder, the better.
I mean, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about the power of these pamphlets. It's amazing that written stuff on sheets of paper delivered repeatedly, which is what they were doing back then in all of these revolutions, right, have the effect that it does. If you look at their internal pamphlet, which is the Talmud, and you look at what that propagandizes, you understand why it's been responsible for so much disturbance in the world, because it's an ideology, let's call it that, it's a bit worse than that basically advocates for all the things that you were just talking about. It's literally against our operating system. We don't operate like that. Now, I don't mind them operating like that, but not around these air parts. That's why I'm a locationist. It's got nothing to do with anything else. I mean, it does. It's got a lot to do with other things. But on a pragmatic level, if the people who shouldn't be where they are were back home, and this goes for all sorts of groups, everything would work better, in my view. And it's the attempt, a lot of our own people have been drawn into this ideology of, well, we've got to convert these people to Christianity or this, that, and the other. You can't. It's a completely idiotic waste of your own energy. If everybody devotes their own, this is my take, you devote your own energies to your own people, things will resolve. They will resolve. And there's a quality of life available to us that we're never going to achieve while huge chunks of people's energies are running around, pumping it into people that can't really receive it for cultural differences, internal operating system differences, whatever we want to describe it. It's rude. It's actually not helpful to go along to groups of people and say, we know how to sort you out. No, you don't. I mean, history tends to show that there is no good solution in these things. All that happens is, oh yeah, let's have some toys and trinkets for a few hundred years, and then bang, it all goes off and millions of people get killed. Because nature says, no, you're completely different. Stop arsing about, this is daft. And it gives you plenty of time to adjust, but we tend not to. Because people become convinced of their own worldview and want to impose it on others. It's never about invite. It's always about imposition, and it doesn't work. it just doesn't work.
Yeah, spot on, absolutely spot on there. But the big problem is what we learn from history is we don't learn from history, and that's always been the case. And going back to what I was saying about children. Now, what did work was the yellow vests in France because they didn't have a leader. It was leaderless. But it was mainly farming folk that were in it, and they are responsible people generally. But unfortunately, it's been infiltrated now. But before it was infiltrated, it was fantastic because they was doing the right things. They were taking over things and saying, like, for example, the French auto routes, where you usually had to pay to go onto them, they were just letting people straight through and they're saying, right, we're going to take over this country. But again, it's like everything else, they get infiltrated.
I know.
Are they still a thing? Like, I haven't heard about the yellow vests in a long time.
No.
I don't know.
I haven't heard about them, but there might still be a thing. I mean, it shows you how much, whatever we like, we're always at the effect of what the media decides to actually focus on and pump out.
Right.
It's why I tend to think that the only sort of healthy route for all of us is local politics. I think all politics has to be local because you need to know the people literally that you're living with and what they want. And like we've mentioned here before, in England, prior to the 1930s or whatever, and even afterwards, for quite a time afterwards, before the full onslaught of this centralisation commie system had kicked in, under the guise of freedom and democracy, of course, you could go to different parts of England and they were distinctly very different. Very, very different.
Yeah.
The Midlands was very different to Cornwall, and Cornwall was very different from Yorkshire, and Yorkshire was very different from Cumbria. The things were just different, and Liverpool and Manchester were different from other parts. They had their own distinct, unique culture. It was different. The shops were designed slightly different, or the buildings were different, because everybody had done things locally, and it made it great. That's... you could travel around a bit. Oh, don't they do it different here? You're not from these here parts and all this kind of stuff. But it's wonderful. It's really good. And even now, I think, Eric, you were mentioning the other day that going to Cornwall, and it still holds true to this day, or at least it's certainly in the cultural memory, it's distinctly a very different place. There is a kind of magic to it.
Yes.
It's got a different... I remember going down there when I was 19, and we were there for about 8 or 9 days. We all went down in a transit van camping. It was just... fantastic. It just felt totally different, like an adventure in a way. I know it sounds... England's not very big, but going to Cornwall is very different. The people speak different, and they eat Cornish pasties. Well, so what's not to like about that? And all these other things, and the cream's great. And I remember when I went down with my mum and dad, my mum had always wanted to go. This was the last family holiday we did when I was about 14. And my mum just couldn't stop buying all the toffee. She just bought back so much creamy toffee and stuff. The cart was full of it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very different. All these, I know these.
And they believe in...
Yeah.
Yes. And they believe in piskies as well, don't they? Not pixies, piskies.
Do they?
The Cornish piskie. And also, they're trying to revive the language because they had a different language, didn't they? It was Gaelic. And they could converse with some people in France who spoke Gaelic, and Welsh and Scottish Gaelic. But yes, the last Cornish woman who couldn't speak English but could only speak Gaelic, I think she died about 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they are trying to bring it back because Cornwall is actually separated by a river, and and they call Britain or England the mainland. And when they built is it the River Tay?
Mm-hmm.
Is it Tay? I think it is.
I don't know.
When they built the bridge over, they were pretty upset about that because you had to go over by boat before that. That's it.
Something that's going on here.
I'd like to live.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. Okay, I've finished.
Oh,
What's
you're
going
so
on?
kind.
What's going on over in
Well-
Canada, Monica? What's
Well,
going
I'm
on
just
over
thinking about what you said. It's very, very true that we must do things at a local level. And I'm just thinking, the local level of governance, that would be the municipalities. So whether it's the, town council or village council or city council, that's the most local political level. But you know what? Here in Canada, they have all been usurped by some kind of a United Nations agenda for partners for climate protection since the 1990s.
Right.
I think the mid-1990s. And they've all signed on to this. And I recently actually wrote a letter to the mayor and council here, and it became public because I published it, plus I copied it to the local paper, and they actually published it. And it's on my website, so people could look this up under freespeechmonica.com, at Monica with a K. And they haven't really responded to it other than to give a basic acknowledgement that they received it after I insisted. 3 weeks later, I resent it and said, well, I haven't even heard an acknowledgement of receipt. So then they acknowledged receipt of it. But I was asking them basically, who do they vow their allegiance to when they become mayor and village councillors, that kind of thing, because I don't think it's to us, the people.
I doubt
it. To this, yeah. And so, but one of the things that, I'm not trying to say, I'm not telling this story to make people lose hope that, you should work at a local level, but I think what we need to do is set up our own systems. I guess people call it parallel economies, and private members associations, that kind of thing, PMAs. There's all kinds of good things going on as we speak on the ground with people. But one of the things that happens with these town councils and whatnot, and what ties their hands, is grant money. Now, any time you rely on grant money, so you've got people that their whole job is to apply for grants from government so that you can fund this and fund that, well, then you are already a slave, because then your hands are tied. How you spend that money, and then you're going to be afraid to do things according to how you think things should be done, because then you're going to lose your grant money, and et cetera, right? I'm kind of just giving you this framework picture. Yeah. So this is what we have to extricate ourselves from, these systems where we're so reliant on government money. I mean, where does this come from? Ultimately, it's we that do the work that creates wealth. It's, anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. And I see we're almost out of time. So
we are almost out of time. We are almost out of time. But the idea of PMAs, I've got a few sites to jump into, not necessarily on PMAs, but this whole movement of things like the sovereign. There's a whole cluster of things like documents that weigh down upon us that were, of course, never explained to us at school, like birth certificates, like taxation. All of this, the machinery of our enslavement, is just assumed to be how a nation needs to be organized. It's only when you begin to sort of unpick it that you realize that all of it is effectively just an extension of the usury class. This is just how it's matured, so that it's hidden to some degree. People go, well, of course we need to pay our taxes. Do we? For what? I think I mentioned here before, during the height of the British Empire, 1859, there were 16,000 civil servants running the whole thing. Today in England, there are 500,000 of these buggers. 500,000, right? 500,000 people with laser printers writing 200-page reports when 4 paragraphs would do. It's asphyxiating life. It's literally death by bureaucracy. And I think, one of the problems with the so-called rulers, as it were, and we're very near to the end, by the way, is that they're addicted to, they think the solution is to keep coming up with more and more rules. And as the Romans said, the proliferation of law is the end of civilization. And what are we living through? It's just non-stop rules. No one can keep up with them. Oh, well, we've got the internet now. We can bombard you with even more. No. it's the removal of all these things that we want. Hey, there's the outro music. Anyway, Monica, any final few words in the last minute or so?
Oh, thank you for having me on. If you want to check out truthandjusticeforgermans.com, that's one website that I have, and then the freespeechmonica.com with a K. And I have the Flip Side with Monica, a Saturday regular show on the Republic Broadcasting Network. I'm on Odyssey. I'm on all kinds of places, Facebook as well.
Cool.
So thank you so much, Paul. It was a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure having you, Monica, and we look forward to your return in a month or so's time. It'll be absolutely marvellous. There's lots to do, and great having a chat. And Eric, you've got a show, I guess, on Sunday coming up at 8 o'clock, yeah?
That's right. Yes, we've got an additional one on Friday as well. So there we go. Because it's last Friday of every month, so we have an extra one.
Oh, wow.
There we go. Thanks, Paul, for giving it a plug. Much appreciated.
No, that's great.
So
we'll be back.
There we go.
Fantastic. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Paul. And for everybody in the chat and everything, we'll be back at the same time next week. We'll see you all next Thursday. And we might not talk about usury next week, but no guarantees. Okay. See you all next week, everyone. Bye for now.